Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Naruto had multiple ancient Zanpakutō and ruled Hueco Mundo, Bleach. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Awakening of Crimson Chains. Blood splattered across bone-white sand as Naruto's fist connected with the masked face of his attacker. The creature, a hollow, he'd learned they were called, staggered backward, its elongated insectoid body swaying precariously. The shattered remains of its mask revealed a face contorted with rage and hunger. "You think yourself different," the hollow hissed, mandibles clicking in agitation. "You think yourself above us. But you will learn, shinobi. In Hueco Mundo, everything devours or is devoured." Naruto wiped sweat from his brow, the endless night sky of this alien realm casting everything in silvery blue light. 3 weeks, or what he assumed was 3 weeks, since he'd arrived in this nightmarish dimension. Time flowed differently here, the crescent moon never moved, the sun never rose. "I'm not interested in your food chain," Naruto replied, chakra swirling visibly around his hand. "I've told you and your friends already, I'm looking for a way home. Attack me again, and I won't hold back." The hollow's laughter echoed across the desert. "Home. There is no home for beings like us. Only hunger, only power, only." A golden blur sliced through the air. The hollow's words died as its body separated cleanly in two, dissolving into particles of reishi that drifted upward like midnight snow. Where it had stood, a slender chain of burning crimson light retracted toward Naruto's outstretched hand, coiling around his forearm before fading beneath his skin. Naruto stared at his hand, flexing his fingers. That weapon, that chain, had been appearing more frequently now, emerging from his body whenever he was in danger, moving almost of its own volition. It felt familiar somehow, resonating with something deep within him, yet entirely foreign. The whisper came again, as it had been coming with increasing frequency. "Call my name." Naruto shook his head, dispelling the voice. He needed to keep moving. Las Noches, the massive structure that dominated the horizon, had to hold answers. Everything in this dimension seemed drawn to it like moths to flame. The dunes of Hueco Mundo stretched endlessly in all directions, broken only by the occasional crystalline tree jutting from the sand like the skeletal fingers of buried giants. Naruto leapt to the top of one, scanning the horizon. His orange and black jumpsuit was torn and stained, but he'd refused to abandon it, one of his few remaining connections to home. Home. The thought brought a fresh wave of memories crashing over him. "You cannot escape, Naruto Uzumaki." Kagaya's voice reverberated rough the dimensional void as she pursued him through the shifting reality. "Your chakra will complete what was stolen from me." Sasuke lay unconscious in Sakura's arms, the battlefield around them fracturing as Kagaya's power tore at the fabric of space-time. Kakashi stood protectively before them, his borrowed Sharingan fading. "You have to seal her now, Naruto," Kakashi shouted. "We won't get another chance." Naruto's hands flashed through seals as golden chakra enveloped his body. 6 paths power surged through him, the tailed beasts lending their strength for one final assault. 6 paths. Planetary devastation seal. The technique connected, but something was wrong. Instead of containing Kagaya, the dimensional energies collapsed inward, creating a swirling vortex of chakra and space-time energy. Naruto felt himself being pulled toward it, his body separating from the physical plane. Naruto. Sakura's scream was the last thing he heard as the world dissolved around him. Then darkness. Endless darkness, punctuated by flashes of worlds and realities he couldn't comprehend. When consciousness returned, he was falling through an ink-black sky toward an endless desert of white sand. The memory faded as Naruto detected movement below. 3 smaller hollows were circling someone. A small figure with a cracked mask and tattered green robe. He cowered against one of the crystalline trees. "Just a little bite," one hollow purred, its body a grotesque fusion of human and serpent. "Your spiritual pressure is so sweet, little Arankar. Nell doesn't taste good." The small figure protested, pressing herself against the tree. Nell is all bones and no meat. Naruto didn't hesitate. His body flashed across the distance with the body flicker technique, appearing between the childlike Arrancar and her attackers. The hollows recoiled in surprise, their masks displaying various reptilian features. "What have we here?" The largest one hissed. Another wanderer. "Your spiritual pressure is unusual. Not Shinigami, not hollow, yet powerful." Naruto formed a familiar cross-shaped hand seal. 3-on-1 against a kid. Not happening on my watch. Shadow clone jutsu. 2 perfect duplicates of Naruto appeared in puffs of smoke, flanking him in defensive stances. The hollows hesitated, clearly unaccustomed to this technique. "What manner of Arrancar are you?" the serpentine one asked, coiling defensively. "I'm not an Arrancar," Naruto replied. "I'm a shinobi of Konohagakure. And I'm giving you one chance to leave." The hollows exchanged glances before the largest lunged forward, jaws unhinging to reveal rows of needle-like teeth. Naruto's clone intercepted, driving a spiraling orb of chakra directly into its mask. Rasengan. The hollow's mask shattered, its body dissolving before it hit the ground. The other two attacked simultaneously, one spitting corrosive liquid while the other extended blade-like appendages. Naruto and his remaining clone dodged with fluid grace, years of ninja training evident in every movement. But as Naruto prepared another Rasengan, something different happened. The familiar voice resonated louder than ever before. "Call my name. Benihimo." The word escaped his lips without conscious thought. Benihimo. A surge of energy unlike anything he'd experienced since arriving in Hueco Mundo erupted from his body. The crimson chain manifested again, but now it extended from both arms, ending in wicked barbed hooks that glowed like molten metal. The chains moved with his thoughts, lashing out to ensnare both remaining hollows. "What is this?" one shrieked as the chains tightened, burning wherever they touched. "This power, it's not Shinigami or hollow." Naruto felt knowledge pouring into him, as if remembering something long forgotten. The chains responded to his will, constricting around the struggling hollows until they burst into particles of spirit energy. Unlike his previous kills, however, these particles didn't simply dissipate. The crimson chains absorbed them, glowing brighter before returning to Naruto's body. The sudden silence was broken by a small voice behind him. "Wow, that was amazing. Nell has never seen chains like that before." Naruto turned to find the small Arrancar staring up at him with wide hazel eyes. Her mask resembled a cartoonish skull that sat atop her green-haired head, with a prominent crack running across it. A faded red line ran across her face beneath large, curious eyes. "Are you okay?" Naruto asked, kneeling to her level. His shadow clone dispelled itself, returning its chakra and experiences to him. "Nell is okay thanks to you." She grinned, revealing a missing tooth. Nell was gathering special rocks when those mean hollows found her. She tilted her head, studying him intently. "You're not a hollow or a Shinigami. What are you?" Naruto smiled despite his exhaustion. "I'm Naruto Uzumaki. I'm a shinobi, a ninja, from another world. I'm trying to find a way home." "Another world?" Nell's eyes widened impossibly further. "Like beyond Hueco Mundo and Soul Society?" "I think so," Naruto replied, glancing around at the desolate landscape. "I was fighting a powerful enemy when something went wrong with a dimensional technique. I ended up here 3 weeks ago." Nell nodded sagely, as if this explanation made perfect sense. "Nell can help you. Nell knows lots about Hueco Mundo." She pointed toward Las Noches. "But it's dangerous to stay in the open. Stronger hollows will come if they sense your spiritual pressure. Especially now that you used that fancy chain thing." Naruto frowned. "Spiritual pressure? You mean chakra?" "Nell doesn't know what chakra is," she replied, climbing onto a nearby rock to be closer to his height. "But your spiritual pressure feels different from Shinigami or hollows. It's warm and bright, like the sun Nell has heard about but never seen." Before Naruto could respond, a familiar sensation washed over him, the distinct feeling of being watched. Years of shinobi training had honed this sense to near perfection. He scanned the horizon, eyes narrowing as he detected movement among the distant dunes. "Nell, we should." A blinding flash of light erupted nearby, the very air seeming to tear open. Naruto instinctively grabbed Nell, leaping away as energy crackled around the distortion. The tear in reality expanded, revealing swirling darkness punctuated by flashes of what looked like the battlefield he'd left behind. What is that? Nell gasped, clinging to Naruto's jacket. A dimensional rift, Naruto whispered, hope surging through him. Like the one that brought me here. The rift pulsed, expanding and contracting erratically. Through the chaotic energy, a Silho Ute became visible, a human figure pushing through the dimensional barrier with visible effort. As the figure emerged, the rift collapsed behind them with a thunderous implosion that sent a shockwave across the desert. Naruto stared in disbelief at the figure rising shakily from the sand. Long indigo hair framed a pale face with distinctive lavender eyes, eyes he would recognize anywhere. Hinata. She looked up, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. Her standard shinobi outfit was torn and scorched, but her eyes widened with unmistakable relief. Naruto-kun, she whispered, before her legs gave out beneath her. Naruto caught her before she hit the ground, cradling her against his chest as she slipped into unconsciousness. Her breathing was shallow but steady. Your friend came through the void? Nell asked, peering curiously at Hinata's face. Nell has never seen eyes like that. Is she a special kind of Shinigami? She's a shinobi like me, Naruto explained, checking Hinata for injuries. From my world. But how did she? His voice trailed off as he noticed the veins around her eyes were still partially bulged, indicating she had been using her Byakugan when she collapsed. Understanding dawned. The Byakugan could perceive dimensional boundaries. Somehow, Hinata had used her dojutsu to track him across dimensions. We need shelter, Naruto decided, lifting Hinata carefully. Nell, you mentioned knowing Hueco Mundo well. Is there somewhere safe we can rest? Nell nodded enthusiastically. Nell knows the perfect place. Not far from here is a cave system that bigger hollows can't enter. Nell uses it to hide sometimes. Lead the way, Naruto said, adjusting Hinata in his arms. As they traveled, Naruto remained vigilant. The presence he'd sensed earlier had vanished. But the feeling of being observed persisted. Nell chattered continuously, explaining aspects of Hueco Mundo that Naruto had yet to learn. The hierarchy of hollows, the eternal night, the dangerous Manos forest beneath the desert. Most hollows can only think about eating, Nell explained as they navigated between massive dunes. They eat each other to get stronger. The strongest become Manos Grande, then Ijukas. And the very strongest become Vasto Lord. And what about Urankar? Naruto asked. You called yourself that earlier. Nell touched her broken mask thoughtfully. Urankar are special hollows who've removed part of their masks and gained Shinigami-like powers. Nell doesn't remember becoming an Urankar though. A shadow passed across her childish features. Nell doesn't remember lots of things. They arrived at a narrow crevice hidden between two crystalline formations. Nell led them through the tight passage that opened into a surprisingly spacious cavern. Phosphorescent moss clung to the walls, bathing the space in soft green light. Nell's secret base, she announced proudly. No big hollows can fit through the entrance, and the special rocks hide spiritual pressure. Naruto gently laid Hinata on a relatively flat section of stone. Her color was improving, and her breathing had deepened into the rhythm of natural sleep. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, marveling at the fact that she had somehow followed him across dimensions. Will your friend be okay? Nell asked, settling cross-legged beside them. I think so, Naruto replied. Hinata is stronger than most people realize. As if responding to her name, Hinata stirred, her eyelids fluttering. Naruto-kun, she murmured, reaching for his hand. I'm here, he assured her, clasping her fingers in his own. You're safe. Her eyes opened fully, taking in her surroundings with visible confusion before focusing on Naruto's face. I found you, she whispered, relief washing over her features. After you disappeared, I couldn't. She broke off, noticing Nell for the first time. Oh, hello, hi, Nell is Nell, the small Urankar greeted enthusiastically. You have pretty eyes. Are you Naruto's mate? Both shinobi flushed crimson at the question. Nell, Naruto began awkwardly, humans don't really use the term mate. Hinata sat up slowly, wincing slightly. I'm Hinata Hyuga, she introduced herself with a gentle smile. Thank you for helping Naruto-kun. Nell beamed, apparently delighted by the soft-spoken newcomer. Nell likes you. You feel different from Naruto, but still warm. Hinata looked questioningly at Naruto, who shrugged. She means your chakra, I think. They call it spiritual pressure here. Here, Hinata repeated, fully taking in their surroundings for the first time. We're in another dimension. The Byakugan showed me images, but Hueco Mundo, Naruto confirmed. Land of the hollows, spirits that have lost their hearts and devour others. He briefly explained what he'd learned during his 3 weeks of wandering, from the nature of hollows to the mysterious Lost Noches structure. Hinata listened attentively, her analytical mind working behind those perceptive eyes. The dimensional rift collapsed behind me, she said when he finished. During the battle with Kagaya, when you disappeared, everyone thought, her voice caught. The allied forces believed you had been killed. What about Sasuke, Sakura, Kakashi-sensei? Naruto asked urgently. They survived, Hinata assured him. Kagaya was weakened by whatever happened with the dimensional collapse. Sasuke managed to seal her away, but the cost. She looked down at her hands. Many died in the aftermath as the dimensional distortion spread. And you tracked me through those distortions, Naruto said. Understanding dawning. With your Byakugan. Hinata nodded. Not immediately. It took weeks of meditation, extending my vision beyond normal limits. The Byakugan can perceive chakra networks across great distances, but dimensions. She shook her head in wonder. I could see fragments, echoes. I followed your chakra signature through paths between worlds. That's incredible, Hinata, Naruto said. Genuine admiration in his voice. But how did you physically travel here? The rifts left by Kagaya's power were still healing, she explained. I found one that resonated with your chakra signature and I focused all my remaining chakra into it, using the gentle fist to widen the breach just enough. Naruto stared at her in amazement. The shy, unassuming IRL he'd known for years had literally torn through the fabric of reality to find him. The realization stirred something profound within him. You risked everything, he said softly. A faint blush colored her cheeks. I couldn't leave you alone, she replied simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Their moment was interrupted by Nell's excited voice. Nell feels something. Your chained friend is getting restless. Naruto felt it too, a stirring beneath his skin where the crimson chains had disappeared. The voice that had been whispering to him grew louder, more insistent. It is time we spoke properly. Naruto Uzumaki. What's happening? Hinata asked, her Byakugan activating instinctively. She gasped at what she saw. Your chakra network, it's changing. Naruto felt himself being pulled inward, consciousness diving deep into his mindscape. Unlike previous visits to his inner world, where he'd confronted Kurama in a flooded basement or pristine white space, he found himself standing in an ethereal landscape that resembled neither the shinobi world nor Hueco Mundo. Massive chains of crimson light crisscrossed a twilight sky, connecting floating islands of crystalline formations. Standing before him on a central platform was a figure that made him catch his breath. The being appeared masculine but with an otherworldly grace that transcended gender. Crimson armor covered a tall, slender form, intricate patterns etched into every plate. Long hair the color of fresh blood flowed behind him despite the absence of wind. His face, partially obscured by a mask resembling half of a fox's visage, bore markings similar to the whiskers on Naruto's own cheeks. At last, we meet face to face, the being spoke, his voice resonating with multiple tones. I am Benihimo, the Crimson Chain. I have waited long for one who could hear my name. Naruto approached cautiously. You're the source of those chains. The weapon that's been helping me. I am far more than a mere weapon. Benihimo replied with a hint of amusement. I am a Zanpakutō, a soul cutter, a manifestation of your soul's power in this realm. My soul. Naruto glanced around. What about Kurama? The Nine Tails. A rumbling chuckle emerged from behind a nearby crystalline formation. The massive form of the nine-tailed fox padded into view, though he appeared different, his orange fur are now streaked with patterns of crimson energy, nine tails wrapped partially in chain-like markings. I'm still here, Kit, Kurama growled, though without his usual malice. But this place has changed us both. Benihimo nodded. When you crossed dimensions, your chakra, particularly that of the nine tails, resonated with the spiritual energy of Hueco Mundo. Part of your power manifested as me, a Zanpakutō spirit. I represent your determination, your unbreakable will, and your power to bind and protect. The chains, Naruto said in understanding. Yes, the crimson chains are my primary ability. They can bind, attack, defend. And most importantly, purify. They respond to your will and intent, growing stronger as you do. Naruto frowned. Purify. What do you mean? You've noticed that when you destroy a hollow with my power, its spirit energy doesn't simply dissipate, Benihimo explained. Unlike Shinigami who purify hollows and send them to Soul Society, or hollows who devour each other. Your power transforms their energy. You neither destroy nor consume, you convert. Convert into what? Kurama rumbled thoughtfully. Into something neither hollow nor Shinigami. Something new. Benihimo gestured to the landscape around them. This inner world reflects the change beginning within you. You are becoming something unique to this dimension, a bridge between worlds. Naruto Lu, Ked between the fox and the armored figure. Is that why hollows are drawn to me? Why they keep attacking? Partially, Benihimo confirmed. Your spiritual pressure is enticing to them, unfamiliar yet powerful. But there's more. The spirit's expression grew serious. Your arrival has disrupted the balance of Hueco Mundo. Powers that have remained dormant for centuries have taken notice. Great, Naruto muttered. Just what I needed. More powerful enemies. Not all who watch are enemies, Benihimo said cryptically. And not all powers awakening are external. I am merely the first of what lies dormant within you. The first? You mean there are more? Zanpakutō. In time, was the enigmatic reply. For now, you must master my abilities. Your friends need you. Friends. Naruto's head snapped up. Hinata and Nell. Are they in danger? The world around him began to fade as consciousness returned to his physical form. The last words he heard were Benihimo's warning. Remember, the chains respond to your will. Bind what threatens. Protect what matters. Naruto's eyes snapped open to find Hinata shaking him urgently. Naruto-kun. Something's coming. Something powerful. Nell was pressed against the far wall of the cave, eyes wide with terror. Bad hollows, she whispered. Very bad hollows. Naruto leapt to his feet, extending his senses outward as Benihimo had shown him in their brief encounter. He could feel them now, multiple presences approaching, their spiritual pressure heavy and malevolent. How many? He asked Hinata, who had activated her Byakugan again. 5, she replied, the veins around her eyes bulging with chakra. They're moving fast, directly toward us. Their chakra, no, spiritual pressure, is unlike anything I've seen. Similar to Nell's but far more dense. Urankar. Nell confirmed fearfully. Strong ones. They must have felt your friend come through the tear. Naruto moved toward the cave entrance, chakra already swirling around his body. Stay here with Nell, he told Hinata. I'll handle this. Hinata stepped forward, her expression resolute. We'll face them together, she said firmly. I didn't cross dimensions to hide while you fight. Naruto opened his mouth to argue, then closed it with a smile. This was the same Hinata who had stood before Pain when everyone else had fallen. Who was he to deny her courage? Nell will help too, the small Urankar declared, though her trembling belied her brave words. Nell knows about Urankar techniques. They emerged from the cave just as 5 figures appeared on the horizon, using a high-speed movement technique that left afterimages in their wake. They stopped 100 yards away, arranging themselves in a loose semicircle. Each wore variations of white uniforms with distinctive masks or mask fragments. Marking them as Urankar, the leader stepped forward, a tall woman with dark skin, aqua eyes, and blonde hair that fell just below her shoulders. The high collar of her jacket concealed the lower half of her face, while a sword hung at her waist. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes assessed Naruto with calculating precision. Interesting, she said, her voice carrying across the sand. Reports spoke of an anomaly with unusual spiritual pressure. I did not expect to find a human, a child Urankar, and... Her gaze shifted to Hinata. Something else entirely. We mean no harm, Naruto called out, taking a step forward. We're just trying to find our way home. Home. The woman's eyes narrowed slightly. Hueco Mundo is home to hollows and Urankar alone. Humans, particularly humans with your unique spiritual signature, do not belong here. I didn't exactly choose to come, Naruto replied, keeping his tone even despite the tension building in the air. A battle in my world created a dimensional rift. One of the other Arankar, a slender female with heterochromatic eyes, leaned toward the leader. Chir-sama, his spiritual pressure, it's not entirely human. There's something else beneath the surface. Chir, apparently the leader's name, nodded almost imperceptibly. You've been destroying hollows, she stated. Not merely destroying, consuming their spiritual energy. That power is not of Soul Society or Hueco Mundo. Naruto felt Benihimo stirring within him, responding to the potential threat. I've only defended myself, he insisted. And I haven't been consuming anything. Yet the spiritual energy disappears, Chir countered. And your own grows stronger. We've been monitoring the anomalies for weeks. Hinata stepped forward, her stance deceptively casual though Naruto knew she was prepared to strike if necessary. We don't seek conflict, she said, her quiet voice carrying surprising authority. But we will defend ourselves if attacked. Chir's gaze shifted to Hinata, assessing. Your eyes, they see more than ordinary sight, don't they? Hinata didn't respond, but the active Byakugan answered for her. Chir-sama, another Arankar spoke. This one masculine with a partial helmet-like mask. Lord Barrigan's orders were clear. Any anomalies are to be eliminated before they attract unwanted attention from Soul Society. Lord Barrigan is dead, Chir replied flatly, as are Aizen and most of the Espada. The old hierarchies no longer apply in the aftermath of the Quincy War. This exchange caught Naruto's attention. Politics, even in this realm of monsters. Where there was politics, there was potential for negotiation. Perhaps we can help each other, Naruto suggested, lowering his hands in a deliberate show of openness. I have abilities that could be useful. All I want is information, and eventually, a way back to my world. Chir studied him for a long moment before responding. Your power is unknown, therefore dangerous. Yet, she paused, seeming to come to a decision. A demonstration would be informative. Before Naruto could respond, one of the male Arankar flanking Chir drew his sword and vanished. Reappearing instantly behind Hinata with his blade poised to strike. Hinata, Naruto shouted, but she was already moving. 8 trigrams. Air palm. Her hand thrust forward, expelling a concentrated burst of chakra that sent the Arankar flying backward despite his attempt to block. Simultaneously, Naruto felt Benihimo's power surge through him. Without conscious thought, crimson chains erupted from his body. One set intercepting a second Arankar who had moved to attack, while another chain network formed a protective dome around Nell. Benihimo, Naruto called out, the name of his Zanpakutō resonating with power. The chains glowed brighter, expanding their reach. One wrapped around the sword arm of Hinata's attacker as he recovered, binding him in place despite his struggle to break free. Chir had not moved, but her hand now rested on the hilt of her own sword. Fascinating, she murmured. Chains of manifestation, similar to certain Kido techniques, yet fundamentally different. Call off your soldiers, Naruto demanded, chains hovering ready around him. We didn't come here for a fight. Emilio acted without orders, Chir replied calmly, glancing at the bound Arankar. But his impulsiveness has provided a useful demonstration. She raised a hand, and the remaining Arankar stood down, though they remained alert. With a flick of his wrist, Naruto loosened the chains binding Emilio. Though he didn't fully retract them. You're not typical hollows, Naruto observed, noting their organized behavior and clear hierarchy. We are Arankar, evolved hollows, Chir corrected. Former Espada and their Fracken. What remains of Aizen's army after the wars that ravaged our realm? Nell is Arankar too, Nell piped up unexpectedly, peering from behind Naruto's leg. But Nell doesn't remember being in any army. Chir's eyes widened almost imperceptibly at the sight of Nell. Something like recognition flashed across her features before her composed mask returned. The child should not be here, she said quietly. There are those who would recognize her, despite her current state. Nell shrank back, suddenly uncertain. Nell doesn't understand. Hinata, ever perceptive, stepped closer to Nell protectively. You know who she is, she said to Chir. Her true identity. Chir did not immediately respond. Instead, she turned her attention back to Naruto. Your power to bind is impressive. But it is your purification ability that intrigues me most. You neither destroy hollows completely nor consume them as other hollows do. Benihimo, my Zanpakutō, says I convert their energy somehow, Naruto explained cautiously. This revelation caused a ripple of murmurs among the Arrancar. Chie herself seemed to reassess him entirely. A human with a Zanpakutō, she mused. Not a substitute Shinigami like Kurosaki, yet wielding similar power. The implications are significant. One of her companions, the female with heterochromatic eyes, whispered something to her. Chie nodded slightly before addressing Naruto again. The desert is not safe for discussion. Neither is this cave, regardless of how well it masks spiritual pressure. Shish. He gestured toward the distant structure of Las Noches. We have established a sanctuary in the eastern wing of Las Noches, away from the remnants of Barragan's forces. If you truly seek information out Hueco Mundo and potential paths between dimensions, you will find it there. Naruto exchanged glances with Hinata, who gave a subtle nod. Her Byakugan could detect deception, and she apparently found none in Chie's offer. How do we know this isn't a trap? Naruto asked nonetheless, chains still hovering protectively around them. You don't, Chie replied honestly. Just as I have no Garan. Chie, your unusual power won't threaten what fragile stability we've established. We are both taking calculated risks. Naruto considered this. Benihimo had mentioned that not all who watched were enemies. And his instincts, usually reliable, didn't sense malice from Chie despite her obvious power. All right, he decided. We'll come with you, but at the first sign of betrayal. Understood, Chie said simply. She turned to her companions. Apache, Sung-sun, Mila Rose, scout ahead. Ensure our path remains clear. Emilio, take the rear guard position. The Arrancar dispersed according to her commands, moving with military precision. Chie herself remained, studying Naruto with those penetrating aqua eyes. Your chains, she said quietly. They feel familiar somehow. An echo of something ancient. She shook her head slightly, as if dismissing the thought. We should move quickly. Your arrival has not gone unnoticed, and there are forces in Hueco Mundo far less inclined to conversation than I am. As they began their journey toward Las Noches, Nell insisted on riding on Hinata's shoulders, chattering continuously about various landmarks and hollow territories they passed. Hinata listened attentively, asking occasional questions that revealed her analytical mind working to understand this new world. Naruto found himself walking alongside Chie, who maintained a vigilant silence. After several minutes, he decided to break it. You're not what I expected, he admitted. The hollows I've encountered so far have been less reasonable. Most hollows exist in a state of perpetual hunger. Chie replied without looking at him. Evolution to Arrancar status brings clarity of thought, purpose beyond mere consumption. Though the hunger never truly disappears. And what's your purpose? Naruto asked. You mentioned establishing stability. Chie was silent for so long that Naruto thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was measured, revealing little emotion. Survival, initially. After Aizen's defeat, the Quincy invasion, and the subsequent power vacuum, Hueco Mundo descended into chaos. Those of us who remained gathered what forces we could see, carving out territories where the endless cycle of predation might be managed, if not entirely stopped. You're trying to build something, Naruto realized. A civilization of sorts. A bold interpretation, Chie replied. Though she didn't deny it. Arrancar retain memories of their human lives, fragments of what it meant to exist in a society. Some find these memories compelling. The sea. Conversation paused as they navigated a particularly treacherous section of dunes. Naruto noticed how Chie's followers maintained perfect formation despite the difficult terrain, always keeping their group protected from potential attacks. The girl, Nell, Chie said suddenly. Has she mentioned anything about her past? Memories of Las Noches. Naruto glanced back to where Hinata and Nell were following. The small Arrancar now animatedly describing different types of hollows to an attentive Hinata. Only that she doesn't remember much, Naruto replied. She seems traumatized, honestly. Why? Who is she? Chie's eyes narrowed slightly. It's not my story to tell. But if my suspicions are correct, her presence complicates matters considerably. Before Naruto could press further, one of Chie's companions, Apache. He recalled. returned in a blur of sonido. Cheer-sama, she reported urgently. Exequias patrols ahead. At least 20, moving in search formation. Exequias, Naruto questioned. Execution squad, Cheer explained grimly. Formerly under Shieloporo's command, now serving whoever controls the western sectors. They hunt deserters and intruders with single-minded efficiency. Can we go around them? Hinata asked, her Byakugan already active and scanning the area. Their spiritual pressure detection abilities are exceptional, Cheer replied. And your group's signature is distinctive. Confrontation is likely inevitable. Naruto felt Benihimo's presence stirring within him again. The crimson chains beneath his skin pulsed with anticipation. They will test your resolve. The Zanpakutō spirit whispered. Show them the difference between mere destruction and true purification. Asterisk. Let me handle them, Naruto said, stepping forward. Hinata, protect Nell. Cheer. Keep your people back unless absolutely necessary. You propose to face 20 Exequias alone? Cheer asked, skepticism evident despite her neutral tone. Naruto gave her a confident grin that harkened back to his academy days. Trust me, this is a perfect opportunity to show you what Benihimo and I can really do. Without waiting for her response, he leapt forward, crossing the distance toward the approaching Exequias patrol with a burst of chakra-enhanced speed. As he ran, he formed the familiar cross-shaped hand seal. Multi-shadow clone jutsu. 50 perfect copies of Naruto appeared, surrounding the startled Exequias who had just crested a dune ahead. They wore identical skeletal masks and carried various weapons, their spiritual pressure cold and mechanical compared to other Arankar he'd encountered. Intruder identified, their leader announced tonelessly. Executing termination protocol, the Exequias attacked in perfect unison, moving with mechanical precision. Naruto's clones engaged them head-on, each displaying the hand-to-hand combat prowess he'd developed over years of training. But these opponents were stronger than the average hollow, their Hiero skin deflected normal physical attacks. And their coordinated movements made landing significant blows difficult. Several clones dispelled as Zanpakutō sliced through them, their experiences returning to the original Naruto. He analyzed the Exequias' fighting patterns, noting weaknesses in their rigid formation. Time to step it up, Naruto muttered. Benihimo. Crimson chains erupted from his arms, extending to impossible lengths as they weaved between his remaining clones. The chains moved with fluid precision, parrying sword strikes, binding limbs, and creating defensive barriers where needed. The Exequias faltered momentarily at this unexpected ability, then adapted with algorithmic efficiency. Unknown spiritual technique detected, increasing combat intensity. They released their Zanpakutō, calling out release commands that transformed their weapons into more powerful forms. Energy blasts tore through the ranks of clones, decimating their numbers. Naruto felt Benihimo's guidance flowing through him. The chains retracted slightly before plunging into the sand beneath the battlefield. Crimson chain network. Binding cage. The desert erupted as hundreds of chain segments burst upward, forming a dome-like structure that surrounded the entire Exequias patrol. The chains intersected and connected, creating a cage of glowing crimson energy that contracted inward, restraining the enemies despite their struggles. Now for the purification, Naruto whispered, placing his palm against the main chain. Energy pulsed from his hand, traveling through the network until each chain segment glowed with intensifying light. The Exequias struggled more violently as the purification process began, their spiritual bodies beginning to dissolve, not into scattered particles, but into concentrated streams of energy that flowed back along the chains toward Naruto. Impossible, the Exequias leader stated flatly as its body began to disintegrate. This technique is not catalogued in any. Its voice cut off as the purification completed. Where 20 Exequias had stood, now only rippling sand remained. The chains retracted into Naruto's body, bringing with them the converted energy. But instead of simply absorbing it, Naruto felt Benihimo directing the energy elsewhere, reshaping it, transforming it into something new. The process completed with a flash of crimson light that momentarily illuminated the entire area. When the light faded, a small crystalline object rested in Naruto's palm, a perfect sphere that pulsed with inner light, neither hollow nor Shinigami in nature. What is this? He wondered aloud, examining the crystal. A seed of potential, Benihimo answered in his mind. The first step toward what we can create together. Asterisk. Naruto turned to find Tear, Hinata, Nell, and the other Arrancar staring at him with varying expressions of shock and awe. Nell bounded forward first, examining the crystal with childlike curiosity. Pretty, she exclaimed. It feels happy. Nell doesn't sense any hunger in it at all. Tear approached more cautiously, her eyes fixed on the crystal. In all my centuries in Hueco Mundo, she said quietly, I have never witnessed anything like this. You didn't destroy them or consume them. You transformed them. Into what? Hinata asked, her Byakugan examining the crystal. Something new, Naruto replied, echoing Benihimo's words. A seed of potential. Tear's expression remained unreadable, but something in her eyes had changed. A calculating assessment had given way to genuine interest, perhaps even the first flicker of hope. We should continue to Las Noches immediately, she decided. What you've demonstrated changes everything. She glanced at the crystal still resting in Naruto's palm. The balance of power in Hueco Mundo has just shifted significantly. As they resumed their journey, Hinata fell into step beside Naruto. That power, she said quietly. It's unlike anything I've seen, even with the Byakugan. Your chakra network is evolving. Adapting to this dimension. Benihimo says I'm becoming a bridge between worlds, Naruto explained, still processing the implications himself. Whatever that means. Hinata smiled gently. It means you're still Naruto Uzumaki, finding a way to change things for the better, no matter where you are. Naruto returned her smile, grateful for her unwavering faith. As they approached the massive structure of Las Noches, its white walls gleaming under the eternal crescent moon, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something far more complex than a simple sanctuary. The seed of potential weighed in his pocket, a tangible reminder that in this world of endless hunger and hollow existence, he now possessed the power to create something entirely new. Whether that creation would lead to salvation or greater conflict remained to be seen. Chapter 1 End Chapter 2, Desert Throne. The crystal spun between Naruto's fingers, catching the moonlight as he perched atop one of Las Noches' countless spires. 3 weeks had passed since their arrival at the massive fortress, 3 weeks of exploration, negotiation, and increasing complexity. Below him, the eastern district sprawled in a labyrinth of white corridors and open courtyards where Arrancar moved with newfound purpose. Tear's faction had established an impressive operation here, part military encampment, part budding society, food stores for those Arrancar who still craved material sustenance, training grounds where younger hollows learned to harness their abilities, even crude marketplaces where goods salvaged from the human world were traded, all of it precarious, all of it vulnerable to the factional conflicts that seemed to define Hueco Mundo's politics. Can't sleep either. Naruto turned to find Hinata approaching along the narrow walkway, her movements graceful despite the dizzying height. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, though her smile remained warm. Just thinking, he replied, making space for her beside him. You should be resting. You pushed your Byakugan too hard again today. I'm fine. The automatic response betrayed by the slight tension around her mouth. The evolution of her visual prowess came with increasing cost. Headaches that left her nauseated, moments when her vision would fracture into kaleidoscopic glimpses of multiple dimensions. Naruto's hand found hers, squeezing gently. Liar. A soft laugh escaped her. Perhaps a small headache. Below them, a patrol of Arrancar changed shifts along the perimeter wall. The Christ. Al in Naruto's other hand pulsed with soft luminescence, responding to his fluctuating emotions. 17, he said quietly. 17 crystals created from purified hollows. 17 seeds of potential, and I still don't fully understand what they are. Hinata studied the crystal, her expression thoughtful. They respond to you. When you focus your will through them, they change things. The atmosphere, the terrain. Small things, Naruto emphasized. Making the sand fertile enough for those weird plants to grow. Purifying water sources. Nothing revolutionary. Tear seems to think otherwise. Naruto nodded, remembering the Arrancar leader's intense interest in the crystals. She sees their military potential. Weapons, defenses, advantages in their territorial disputes. And you don't want that. It wasn't a question. Hinata knew him too well. Understood his desire to create rather than destroy, to find solutions beyond endless conflict. Benihimo says they're meant for something more, Naruto explained. Something constructive. I can feel it when I hold them. They're not weapons, they're seeds. They want to grow, to transform. Hinata's fingers intertwined with his. Then help them do that. Regardless of what others expect. You've never been one to follow the conventional path. The familiar reassurance warmed him. Since her arrival, Hinata had become his NCHOR in this alien realm, her quiet strength and unwavering faith a constant amid uncertainty. What had begun as gratitude for her impossible journey across dimensions had deepened into something more profound. Something he was only beginning to recognize. You should see Kimura tomorrow, he suggested, referring to the medical Arankar who had been helping manage Hinata's episodes. These headaches are getting worse. She sighed but nodded. I will, but only after we visit the outer settlement. They're expecting us. The outer settlement had begun as a curious phenomenon, weaker hollows eking protection near Las Noches walls after witnessing Naruto's purification abilities. Unlike the stronger Arankar in Tear's faction, these were mostly incomplete Mainos and newly evolved Ajukas. Still struggling with their constant hunger but drawn to the possibility of something beyond endless consumption. Nell will want to come too, Naruto noted with a smile. She's appointed herself official ambassador to the baby hollows, as she calls them. Hinata's expression softened at the mention of their small companion. She's been having the dreams again. About her past. Fragments returning. Has she said anything specific? Quote, names. Places within Las Noches I'm certain she's never visited in her current form. Hinata hesitated. She mentioned someone called Neutra. The name seemed to frighten her, even half asleep. Naruto's expression darkened. He'd asked Tear about Nell's past, but the Arankar leader remained evasive, stating only that some histories were better left buried. Whatever trauma had reduced the apparently once powerful Arankar to her childlike state, it had left deep scars. We'll figure it out, he promised. Help her recover her memories at her own pace. A comfortable silence fell between them as they gazed out over the moonlit landscape. Beyond Las Noches walls, the endless desert of Hueco Mundo stretched to the horizon, broken only by the Sional crystalline tree or mysterious rock formation. Somewhere in that vastness, other factions of Arankar plotted, Mainos Grande roamed in herds, and the few remaining Vastolord maintained their isolation. And somewhere, if Tear's intelligence was correct, rifts occasionally appeared, tears in the dimensional fabric that might offer a path home. Do you ever wonder, Hinata began softly, if we're meant to be here? If this isn't some cosmic accident but a purpose we haven't fully grasped? The question lingered between them, profound in its simplicity. Every day, Naruto admitted. Especially when another crystal forms. Or when those hollows look at me with something besides hunger in their eyes. Like they're seeing something I don't see in myself. Hinata's gaze met his, moonlight reflecting in her lavender eyes. I see it too. Tear Harabelle stood motionless before the massive window in her chamber, hands clasped behind her back as she observed the training sessions below. Her Frakken, Apache, Mila Rose, and Sung Sun sparred with increasing intensity, their movements sharper, more focused than they had been in months. Nearby, other Arankar practiced formation drills, coordinate attacks, defensive maneuvers, all under the watchful eye of her newest allies, or potential threats, depending on how events unfolded. Impressive progress, observed Kimura, the Medica. Arankar who had entered silently behind her. Once a member of Shielaporo's research division, the slim, spectacled Arankar had defected to her faction after the Quincy War, bringing valuable know-how edge of hollow physiology and treatment techniques. They're motivated, Tear replied without turning. The presence of outsiders has stimulated their competitive instincts. The human girls' ocular abilities are particularly remarkable, Kimura continued, setting a folder on Tear's desk. Her latest examination results. The integration of her chakra system with our spiritual pressure environment continues to accelerate. Though not without physiological consequences. Tear finally turned, lifting the folder to scan its contents. The headaches, increasing in frequency and intensity. Her brain is essentially rewiring itself to process multiple dimensional planes simultaneously. The spiritual pressure here in Hueco Mundo acts as a catalyst, enhancing abilities that would have remained dormant in her original dimension. Quote, "Can you treat her?" Kimura adjusted his glasses, a nervous habit from his human life. Treat? No. Manage symptoms, perhaps, but the evolution appears self-directing. It will either stabilize or... Cheer pressed when he hesitated. Or her mind will fracture attempting to process too many layers of reality at once. Cheer considered this information, her expression unreadable behind the high collar of her jacket. And Uzumaki, his adaptation, unprecedented. Genuine excitement colored Kimura's typically clinical tone. His chakra network OWS perfect integration with spiritual energy. The Zanpakutō manifestation is unlike anything in our records, neither pure Shinigami nor Arankar in nature. And these crystals, he gestured to the SM. All collection displayed on a shelf. Samples Naruto had provided for research. They're repositories of purified, stabilized energy with reactive properties I'm only beginning to understand. Military applications. Kimura hesitated. Potentially significant, but Uzumaki seems resistant to exploring those aspects. He appears more interested in their restorative properties. Restorative, Cheer repeated, turning the unfamiliar concept over in her mind. As a hollow, then Arankar, then Espada, her existence had been defined by consumption, combat, and survival. The idea of restoration, of building rather than destroying, remained foreign despite her efforts to establish stability in her territory. The outer settlement grows, she noted, changing subjects. 27 weaker hollows now, gathering under our walls. They consume the mineral formations Uzumaki's crystals produce rather than hunting each other. A temporary solution at best, Kimura cautioned. Their fundamental hunger remains, without evolution or continued intervention. I'm aware of the limitations, Cheer cut him off. But the principle itself is significant. Cooperation among hunger-driven predators, however tenuous. She returned to the window, watching as Naruto himself entered the training ground below. Apache immediately challenged him to a sparring match, her competitive nature unable to resist. Testing herself against his unusual abilities. Even from this distance, Cheer could see the easy confidence in his movements, the natural charisma that drew others to him. Dangerous qualities in an unknown variable. Continue monitoring both humans, she instructed Kimura. And increase security around the crystal storage. The Western factions will have heard rumors by now. We should expect reconnaissance, possibly direct confrontation. And the child, Nell? Kimura asked carefully, knowing the subject's sensitivity. Cheer's eyes narrowed slightly. Maintain distance, as discussed. If her memories continue returning naturally, so be it, but we will not accelerate the process. And if she remembers everything? If she reclaims her power? The question hung in the air, laden with implica. Tion's Cheer had no desire to address directly. Then we will face that complexity when it arrives, she replied finally. For now, our priorities remain clear. Establish secure territory, develop sustainable resource management, and determine whether our visitors represent opportunity or threat. Kimura bowed slightly before departing, leaving Cheer alone with her thoughts. Below, Naruto had summoned his crimson chains to counter Apache's Sero Blast, the spiritual techniques clashing in a spectacular display that drew observers from throughout the complex. The Shinigami would have felt such power usage, Cheer knew. Soul Society's monitoring of Hueco Mundo might be reduced since the wars, but they weren't blind. Questions would come eventually, then investigators, then conflict. Unless this unpredictable human with his talk of bridges between worlds actually delivered something beyond beautiful ideals and temporary solutions. Her hand unconsciously moved to the hilt of Tiburon, her Zanpakutō a comforting presence at her side. 3 centuries of existence had taught Cheer caution above all else. Yet something about Naruto Uzumaki's absolute conviction stirred long-dormant emotions, oceans she'd believed consumed by the hollow void that had formed her core. Curiosity, possibility, perhaps even hope. Dangerous emotions for a ruler of monsters. From the shadows of Las Noches many corridors, Yoruichi Shihoin observed. Her current form, a small black cat with golden eyes, allowed her to move undetected among the Arankar, gathering intelligence on this fascinating development. 3 weeks of surveillance had yielded more questions than answers, but one thing was abundantly clear. Naruto Uzumaki represented a wildcard that neither Soul Society nor Hueco Mundo had anticipated. The boy moved like a fighter, trained but unorthodox, combining techniques she'd never witnessed with spiritual abilities that defied classification. Not quite Shinigami, definitely not hollow, yet manipulating spiritual energy with instinctive skill. And those chains, they resonated with something ancient, something that tickled memories from her days in Soul Society's archives. Most intriguing was his impact on the spiritual ecosystem around him. Where hollows naturally existed in perpetual hunger and conflict, his presence seemed to calm the voracious impulses, redirect them towards something constructive. The outer settlement was unprecedented, weaker hollows voluntarily gathering without devouring each other, drawn to the strange energy his crystals emitted. Urahara would be fascinated. Once she reported back. If she reported back, the cat slipped through a narrow opening, emerging onto a walkway with a clear view of the training grounds. The Hyuga girl, Hinata, was there now, her fighting style as distinctive as her companions. Gentle, fluid movements that nonetheless contained devastating power, targeting what appeared to be pressure points in her Arankar sparring partner's spiritual network. Yoruichi's tail twitched with professional appreciation. The girl's visual prowess was extraordinary, perceiving spiritual pathways and weaknesses invisible to normal sight. More remarkable was how she'd adapted techniques clearly designed for her home dimension to work effectively in Hueco Mundo's spiritual environment. Adaptability, intelligence, determination, and unmistakable devotion to her spiky-haired companion. A soft scuffing sound alerted Yoruichi to another presence. She remained perfectly still as Nell tumbled into view, playing some solitary Ga. Me involving elaborate patterns drawn in the dust. 3 steps here, then jump, the childlike Arankar muttered to herself, following some invisible instruction. Then spin twice and bow to the throne. She frowned, pausing mid-movement. What throne? Nell doesn't remember any throne. Yoruichi's ears perked forward with interest. The fragmented memories returning to this diminutive Arankar could prove valuable intelligence. From her research in Soul Society's restricted archives, Yoruichi recognized Nell as Neliel II Odelschwenk, former Trace Espada under Aizen's command, reportedly killed years ago. Clearly, those reports had been exaggerated. Nell suddenly went rigid, her playful demeanor vanishing as her head snapped up. "Who's there?" she called out, surprising Yoruichi with her spiritual awareness. "Nell can feel you watching." Calculating quickly, Yoruichi decided direct contact might yield better intelligence than continued shadowing. She stretched lazily, allowing hers elf to become visible as she padded into the light. "Just a cat," she replied in her masculine cat voice, affecting casual disinterest. "Don't mind me." Nell's eyes widened comically. "A talking cat. Amazing." She bounded forward then stopped suddenly, suspicious. "Wait, normal cats don't talk. Are you a hollow cat?" "Something like that," Yoruichi replied ambiguously. "I'm just passing through, looking for interesting things." "You seem interesting." The flattery worked instantly. Nell puffed up with pride. "Nell is very interesting. Nell is friends with Naruto and Hinata and helps them understand. And Hueco Mundo and takes care of the baby hollows and has special memories that come in dreams." "Special memories?" Yoruichi prompted, settling into a comfortable position. "What kind of memories?" Nell's enthusiasm dimmed slightly. "Confusing ones. Nell sees herself bigger sometimes, fighting with a sword. Nell sees other Espada and someone with a scary smile who makes Nell feel afraid." She brightened again. "But Nell also remembers her brothers. Pesci and Dondochaka. Nell got separated from them during a sandstorm, but they're looking for Nell, and Nell is looking for them." Yoruichi filed away these fragments for later analysis. "And what do you think of your new friends?" "Naruto and Hinata. They're the best," Nell declared emphatically, spinning in a circle of pure joy. "Naruto makes the pretty crystals that help the hungry hollows feel better, and Hinata has magic eyes that can see everything and gives the best hugs and always listens to Nell's stories. Even when the stories don't make sense. Especially then." Nell nodded seriously. "Hinata says memories are like puzzle pieces, and we need to be patient until we find enough pieces to see the whole picture." Yoruichi's whiskers twitched with amusement at the surprisingly mature metaphor. "Smart lady. And what about Tyr Haribel? What does she think of your friends? Nell's expression grew surprisingly shrewd, a flash of mature insight breaking through her childish persona. Chie-sama is careful. She watches Naruto like he might be dangerous or might be important. Sometimes both. She talks to him about serious things when she thinks Nell isn't listening. What kind of serious things? About the other Espada territories. About Soul Society. About the hunger that never goes away. Nell dropped her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Chie-sama is afraid, but not of Naruto. She's afraid of hoping too much. The insight startled Yoruichi. Either Nell was more perceptive than her childish demeanor suggested, or fragments of her former analytical intelligence were resurfacing with her memories. Before she could probe further, a distinctive spiritual pressure approached. Naruto, finished with his training session. Yoruichi decided a strategic withdrawal was prudent. I should be going, she told Nell, rising and stretching. Perhaps we'll talk again sometime. Wait, Nell doesn't know your name. Yoruichi paused, considering. You can call me Yoruichi. Yoruichi, Nell repeated carefully, then beamed. Nell will save you some milk next time. Cats like milk, right? Some do, Yoruichi replied with amusement before slipping back into the shadows, leaving Nell waving enthusiastically after her. Fascinating developments indeed. Perhaps she'd delay her report to Urahara a bit longer. Some Taian's warranted personal observation beyond the initial reconnaissance. And something told her Naruto Uzumaki's impact on Hueco Mundo was just beginning. The outer settlement had tripled in size. Hinata surveyed the collection of crude shelters nestled against Las Noches' eastern wall, her Byakugan activated to scan for any potential threats among the gathered hollows. The headache pulsed behind her eyes, a constant companion now, but she ignored it, focusing on the task at hand. 64 distinct spiritual signatures, she reported to Naruto beside her. Primarily Meino's class with 17 Ijukas. No obvious aggression patterns, though the newer arrivals show greater spiritual instability. Naruto nodded, his expression a mixture of amazement and concern as he took in the unprecedented gathering. Hollows of various shapes and sizes moved among makeshift structures constructed from bone fragments, crystalline tree parts, and salvaged materials. Some still wore their full masks. Others had partially broken coverings revealing more humanoid features beneath. All of them turned toward Naruto as he approached, their movements almost reverent. The purifier comes, whispered one. The words spreading through the settlement like ripples in still water. Naruto-kun, Hinata murmured, they've organized themselves. Look at the crystal placement. She indicated the strategic positioning of Naruto's crystals throughout the settlement. The hollows had arranged them in a precise pattern, each crystal partially buried in the sand at exact intervals, creating a network that emitted a subtle, harmonizing energy. They're using them to suppress their hunger, Naruto realized, dampening the impulse to consume each other. Naruto, Hinata, Nell's excited voice proceeded her as she bounded past them into the settlement, immediately swarmed by smaller hollows who greeted her with surprising gentleness. Nell brought presents. The small Arankar produced a bag of ord stones she'd collected from the crystalline forest, distributing them among the childlike hollows with the serious air of an official ambassador. A larger hollow approached, one they recognized from previous visits. Its mask resembled a bovine skull, massive curved horns extending from either side, while its body combined humanoid and animal characteristics in an unsettling blend. Despite its fearsome appearance, it moved with deliberate gentleness, conscious of its power among the weaker residents. Maelstrom Reaper, it greeted Naruto, its deep voice resonating from behind the mask. Your presence honors us. Naruto winced slightly at the title that had spread among the hollows. Just Naruto is fine, Minnows. How is everyone doing? The hunger diminishes daily, Minnows replied, gesturing toward the crystals. Your seeds provide sustenance beyond mere consumption. Some of the newer arrivals still struggle, but they learn. And the patrols? Any trouble? 3 incursions this week. Hunting parties seeking easy prey. A note of pride entered Minnow's voice. We repelled them without casualties. Your defensive formations proved effective. Hinata moved among the gathered hollows. Her medical pack open as she tended to injuries and examined those showing signs of distress. Unlike Naruto's dramatic power, her contribution to the settlement had been quieter but no less significant. Her Byakugan could detect irregularities in spiritual pressure, identifying painful transformation points or dangerous instabilities before they became critical. "This one is ready," she called to Naruto, indicating a trembling hollow whose mask was developing cracks around the edges. Naruto approached, kneeling beside the frightened creature. "It's okay," he reassured it. "The breaking isn't destruction, it's evolution." He placed a hand on the hollow's shoulder, channeling a carefully controlled stream of his unique energy. Crimson chains briefly materialized, wrapping gently the hollow's form before sinking beneath its surface. The mask cracks expanded, pieces falling away to reveal a humanoid face with remnants forming a decorative pattern across the forehead. "Breathe," Naruto instructed as the newly formed Arankar gasped its first conscious breath. "The hunger feels different now, doesn't it? Less consuming, more focused." The Arankar nodded shakily, touching its partial mask with wonder. "I can think clearly, remember things. My name was. It will come back gradually," Hinata assured them, offering water from a canteen. "Don't force the memories." While Hinata oriented the new Arankar, Naruto continued through the settlement, addressing concerns, resolving minor disputes, and occasionally producing small crystals to replace depleted ones. The process no longer required combat. He had discovered how to willingly convert his unique chakra ryutsu hybrid energy into the crystalline forms, though larger specimens still required the purification of hollow energy. "They worship you," observed a cool voice behind him. Naruto turned to find Tear standing at the settlement's edge, her aqua eyes surveying the scene with clinical assessment. "They don't worship me," he corrected. "They're just grateful for an alternative to endless consumption." Semantics. You offer salvation from their fundamental nature. The line between gratitude and worship blurs easily. She nodded toward a crude shrine several hollows had constructed, displaying a particularly vibrant crystal. "Some have already crossed it." Naruto frowned, discomfort evident. "I've discouraged that, successfully." Cheer raised an eyebrow. Zealotry often flourishes despite the object's protestations. She folded her arms, her posture shifting subtly. "Word spreads beyond our territory. The Western factions have sent reconnaissance. They speak of the Maelstrom Reaper, who commands chains of judgment, who transforms rather than destroys." Colorful exaggeration. Perhaps. Her gaze remained steady. "But perception shapes reality in power structures. And Hueco Mundo's power structure is noticing you, Uzumaki." Naruto sighed, running a hand through his spiky blonde hair. "I'm not trying to disrupt your politics, Cheer. I just want to help where I can while finding a way home. Intention rarely dictates outcome." She gestured for him to walk with her, moving away from eager listeners. 3 separate factions have requested audiences in the past week. The Barragan Loyalists, the Forest Enclave, and most concerning, representatives from the Jaguar dynasty. "I don't know what that means." "It means you've become a factor in calculations that have maintained fragile equilibrium since the wars." Cheer's voice remained level, but urgency underscored her words. "Some see opportunity in your abilities. Others perceive threat. None will remain neutral for long." They stopped at the settlement's edge, looking out over the endless desert beyond Las Noches' shadow. In the distance, the distinctive spiritual pressure of a Manos Grande herd rippled across the landscape, their massive forms barely visible on the horizon. "What would you have me do?" Naruto asked finally. "Stop helping them. Pretend I don't have these abilities." "Neither option is viable." Cheer turned to face him directly. "I suggest formalization, structure, deliberate rather than reactive application of your influence." "You're talking politics again." "I'm talking survival," she corrected sharply. "For these hollows who depend on you, for my faction, and for you and your companion. Hueco Mundo respects power and position. Currently, you occupy an anomalous space outside our hierarchies. That makes you unpredictable, therefore dangerous to all established powers." Naruto considered her words, watching as Hinata continued working with the newly formed Arankar, her patience evident even at a distance. Nell had organized some kind of game involving the smaller hollows. Their eerie laughter drifting across the settlement. "What exactly are you proposing?" he asked finally. "A council," Cheer replied. "Formal representation for the growing number of hollows who follow your philosophy." Official recognition of mutual interests between your settlement and my faction. Structured diplomatic channels with other territories. You want me to become a political figure. The idea clearly made him uncomfortable. I want you to acknowledge the position you already occupy, Cheer countered. Whether you intended it or not, you've established authority here. These hollows follow your guidance. Implement your teachings, defend territory in your name. The only question is whether you'll provide them structured leadership or leave them vulnerable through continued informality. The challenge struck home. Naruto's expression shifted as he recognized the responsibility he'd accumulated without fully acknowledging it. I know nothing about governing, he admitted. Few do when they begin. Cheer replied with unexpected candor. I certainly didn't when the mantle fell to me after Aizen's defeat. This rare glimpse of vulnerability from the typically stoic Arrancar surprised Naruto. How did you learn? Necessity. Observation. A hint of grim humor touched her eyes. Costly mistakes. And you're offering to help me avoid those mistakes. I'm offering alliance, Cheer clarified. Mutual benefit through formalized cooperation. Your settlements under my territorial protection, your unique abilities enhancing our defensive capabilities, our experience providing structure to your experiments in hollow reformation. Naruto studied her, sensing the complexity beneath the straightforward proposal. And if a path home appears tomorrow, what happens to them? He nodded toward the settlement. A legitimate concern, Cheer acknowledged. Though according to Kimura's research on your crystals, dimensional stability is increasing in areas where they're established. The probability of random rifts appearing decreases proportionally. The implication hung between them, unspoken but clear. His efforts to help might be simultaneously reducing his chances of finding a way home. Before Naruto could respond, Hinata appeared beside them, her movement so silent neither had noticed her approach. The veins around her eyes were more pronounced than usual, indicating extended Byakugan use. We have visitors, she reported tersely. Northwestern perimeter. 27 signatures, moving in combat formation. Higher density spiritual pressure than standard Arrancar. Cheer's hand moved immediately to her Zanpakutō. The Jaguar dynasty. Earlier than expected, her eyes narrowed as she glanced at Naruto. It seems our decision timeline has accelerated. How long? Naruto asked Hinata. 10 minutes at their current pace. They're making no attempt to conceal their approach. Her expression tightened with pain as she extended her visual range further. Their leader carries a unique spiritual signature, similar to yours, Naruto-kun, but distorted somehow. Another human with hollow powers. Naruto questioned Cheer. No, likely the dynasty's ruler, Viralgo Platito. An ancient Vasto lord who absorbs the abilities of those he defeats. Cheer's normally composed features showed genuine concern. His interest in you is troubling. Naruto's expression hardened with resolve. Get everyone back inside Las Noches, he instructed. Hinata, help Minnows organize the evacuation. Nell stays with you. And you? Hinata asked, though her tone suggested she already knew his answer. I'll meet them with Cheer, he replied, his hand unconsciously moving to where Benihimo's power stirred beneath his skin. If they've come to talk, we'll talk. If they've come for something else. The crimson chains briefly manifested around his arm, responding to his resolve. Then I'll show them exactly why they should reconsider. The Jaguar Dynasty delegation materialized from the swirling sands with theatrical precision, their arrival heralded by a pulse of coordinated spiritual pressure that rippled across the desert floor. Tai 6 warriors arranged in perfect formation around a central figure, their bone-white uniforms adorned with jaguar spot patterns and ceremonial masks covering the upper portions of their faces. Yuto and Cheer stood their ground 50 yards from Las Noches perimeter, presenting a united front despite the internal negotiations still unresolved between them. Behind them, the last of the settlement's hollows were being evacuated into the fortress, Hinata's distinctive chakra signature moving efficiently among them. Impressive response time, Cheer Haribel called the central figure as the formation halted at a calculated distance. Your intelligence network remains formidable despite your reduced circumstances. Viralgo Platito lived up to his name, Silver Virulence, his entire seeming to shimmer with metallic luster under Hueco Mundo's perpetual moonlight. Unlike the humanoid Arrancar surrounding him, he had retained more bestial features, a complete jaguar skull mask, powerful digitigrade legs, and wickedly clawed hands. Yet he carried himself with aristocratic bearing, his posture suggesting centuries of uncontested authority. "Viralgo," Tyr acknowledged with minimal courtesy. "Your encroachment on neutral territory violates our previous arrangements." The Jaguar Vasto Lord made a dismissive gesture. "Circumstances evolve, as must agreements. Particularly when anomalies appear." His gaze shifted to Naruto, golden eyes gleaming behind the skull mask. "The famous Maelstrom Reaper, I presume. Your reputation propagates with remarkable efficiency." Naruto stepped forward, deliberately casual despite the palpable tension. "Just Naruto is fine. I'm guessing you're not here for a friendly chat." A sound like grinding metal emerged from behind the mask. Laughter, Naruto realized with mild disgust. Direct, refreshing. Viralgo's head tilted with predatory assessment. "I've come to extend an invitation. The dynasty's hospitality far exceeds this." He gestured dismissively at Las Noches. "Archaeological relic of failed ambitions." "I'm comfortable where I am," Naruto replied evenly. "But thanks for the offer. Comfort is transient. Power endures." Viralgo's spiritual pressure increased subtly, pressing against them like an invisible weight. "My scouts report fascinating abilities. Purification chains, crystalline manifestations, evolutionary acceleration of lesser hollows. The dynasty would provide superior resources to develop such talents." "You mean you'd provide superior opportunities to study and eventually absorb such talents?" Tyr interjected coldly. "Your reputation for collection precedes you, Viralgo." The Vasto Lord's attention returned to Tyr, his spiritual pressure sharpening with irritation. Bold words from 1W. Ho failed to protect her own Fracken during the Quincy invasion. "Tell me, does young Uzumaki know how many followed you before your reduction in circumstances?" Tyr's expression remained impassive, but Naruto sensed the barb had struck deep. He stepped forward, drawing attention back to himself. "I'm not interested in Hueco Mundo's political history," he stated firmly. "My goals are simple: help those I can while finding a path back to my dimension. If you've come to recruit me, you're wasting your time. If you've come to threaten..." The air around him stirred as his chakra began to manifest visibly. "That would be unwise." Viralgo studied him with renewed interest. "Fascinating. Your spiritual pressure contains elements I've not encountered in millennia of existence. Neither pure Shinigami nor hollow. Yet resonating with both. And something else entirely." Without warning, the Vasto Lord moved, vanishing with a speed that surprised even Naruto's battle-trained reflexes. He reappeared directly before Naruto. One clawed hand extended as if to touch his chest. Perhaps a small sample. Crimson chains erupted from Naruto's body, forming an instantaneous barrier between them. Simultaneously, Tyr's Zanpakutō cleared its sheath with fluid precision, its edge halting mere centimeters from Viralgo's throat. The Vasto Lord remained perfectly still, his golden eyes alight with excitement rather than concern. "Magnificent reflexes," he purred, seemingly unconcerned by the deadly blade at his neck. "The chains respond even without conscious direction. Instinctive defense." Naruto kept his expression neutral despite his internal tension. He hadn't consciously summoned Benihimo. The Zanpakutō had manifested of its own accord, recognizing the threat before he could fully process it. "Step back," he advised the Vasto Lord. Slowly, Viralgo complied with theatrical courtesy, returning to his position among his warriors who had tensed but not moved during the exchange. "Merely confirming reports," he explained, as if his invasion of personal space had been perfectly reasonable. "One hears such exaggerations. Consider them confirmed," Tyr replied coldly. "Lo. Ring her Zanpakutō but not resheving it. Now state your actual purpose here." The Vasto Lord's posture shifted, assuming a more formal stance. "The dynasty proposes an accord. Recognition of the anomaly's significance to Hueco Mundo's future. Shared access to the evolutionary benefits his abilities provide." "Shared access," Naruto repeated skeptically. "To what end?" "Progress, naturally." Viralgo spread his arms in a magnanimous gesture. "Your settlements demonstrate promising concepts. Reduced consumption patterns, cooperative defense, rudimentary civilization among lesser hollows. He dynasty possesses resources to expand such experiments. Territories beyond Haribel's limited influence. Technologies salvaged from multiple realms. And in exchange, Cheer pressed regular visitation rights to settlement areas, observation of purification techniques, modest samples of crystalline formations for independent study. The Vasto Lord's voice remained reasonable, almost generous. Most importantly, neutrality should conflicts arise with other factions. The underlying demand became clear. Naruto's non-interference should the dynasty move against Tear's territory or other Espada remnants. No deal, Naruto stated flatly. Viralgo tilted his head, the gesture somehow conveying both disappointment and predatory assessment. Consider carefully, Uzumaki. The dynasty controls the largest consolidated territory in post-war Hueco Mundo. Our knowledge of dimensional boundaries far exceeds anything Haribel's limited resources can access. The mention of dimensional bow and Daries caught Naruto's attention despite his wariness. What do you know about dimensional travel? More than any entity in this realm, Viralgo replied with absolute confidence. The dynasty archives contain records predating Soul Society itself. Dimensional mechanics, boundary fluctuations, traversal techniques developed and lost over millennia. Naruto exchanged a brief glance with Tear. Who's subtle nod confirmed the probable truth of this claim. The Jaguar dynasty was indeed ancient, its origins lost in Hueco Mundo's prehistory. I'm willing to discuss knowledge exchange, Naruto allowed cautiously. But not at the expense of existing alliances or the settlement's autonomy. Viralgo's spiritual pressure fluctuated with barely contained excitement. Compromise. Acceptable starting position. Perhaps a demonstration of goodwill. He gestured to one of his warriors, who stepped forward bearing an ornate box fashioned from what appeared to be fossilized Mano's bone. A gift. Ansi. End text fragment describing dimensional barriers between Hueco Mundo and adjacent realms. Useless to us, potentially valuable to one seeking passage. The warrior presented the box to Naruto, who hesitated before accepting it. The object felt genuinely old, resonating with dormant spiritual energy that had seeped into its structure over centuries. Thank you, he acknowledged, though his suspicion remained evident. I'll consider your proposal and provide a formal response through appropriate channels. Diplomatic phrasing, Viralgo noted with amusement. You adapt quickly to our politics. His gaze shifted to Las Noches behind them, where numerous Arankar now lined the walls, watching the exchange. The settlement concept intrigues the dynasty. Perhaps a delegation might visit, observe operations directly. After proper protocols are established, Tear interjected before Naruto could respond. Through formal diplomatic channels, as Uzumaki indicated. The Vasto Lord bowed with exaggerated courtesy. Of course, propriety above all. He straightened, his golden eyes fixing one last time on Naruto. Until our next meeting, Maelstrom Reaper. The dynasty watches your progress with great interest. With that parting statement, Viralgo and his warriors departed in the same theatrical manner they had arrived, a synchronized blur of movement that stirred the desert sands into miniature cyclones before disappearing over the horizon. Naruto released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Well, that was intense. Suspiciously accommodating, Tear observed, finally resheathing her Zanpakutō. Viralgo doesn't make social calls or offer genuine gifts. You think this is a trap? Naruto hefted the bone box. Certainly, though the trap may lie in the information itself rather than the object. Tear's expression remained troubled. His interest in your settlements is particularly concerning. The dynasty has shown no previous inclination toward social organization beyond their rigid hierarchy. He wants the crystals, Naruto guessed. Their properties, and the purification technique. Tear began walking back toward Las Noches, Naruto falling into step beside her. Viralgo's power derives from absorption. If he could replicate your ability to convert rather than simply consume. The implications hung between them, ominous in their scope. I need to know what's in this box. Naruto decided, if there's genuine information about dimensional boundaries. Kimura should examine it first, Tear cautioned. The dynasty's gifts often contain subtle complications. As they approached the fortress, Hinata emerged from a side entrance, Nell perched on her shoulders. The veins around her eyes were still prominent, indicating she'd been monitoring the entire exchange with her Byakugan. They've cleared our detection range, she reported. No signs of secondary forces or remaining observers. What did the Jaguar man want? Nell asked, bouncing impatiently. He felt scary, even from inside. Political maneuvering, Cheer replied tersely. An intelligence gathering. Hinata's gaze fell to the bone box in Naruto's hands. That object contains unusual energy patterns. She observed. Not quite dormant, but waiting somehow. Naruto frowned. Can you see inside it? Not clearly. The material itself resists my Byakugan. A flash of pain crossed her features as she pushed her vision further. There's something like a scroll inside, very old. The energy concentrates around specific symbols or writing. Kimura first, Cheer reiterated firmly. Then we can. She broke off as the fortress alarm system activated, a series of spiritual pressure pulses designed to alert defenders without revealing positions to outside forces. The pattern indicated western perimeter breach, multiple attackers. What now? Naruto muttered, handing the bone box to Hinata for safekeeping. More diplomats. Cheer's expression darkened. Unlikely. The western approach has been contested territory since the Quincy War. Baragon loyalists claim it, though they lack the forces to properly defend it. A messenger Arankar appeared via Sonido, kneeling before Tyr. Lady Harabel. Attackers penetrated western sections 5 and 6. At least 30 combatants targeting the primary resource storage. The crystal repository, Tyr realized immediately. Diversion tactics. While the dynasty occupied our attention from the front, Naruto was already moving, chakra flooding his system as he prepared for combat. Hinata, get Nell somewhere safe, then join us if you can. Your Byakugan will help track them through the corridors. Los Noches erupted into coordinated activity as they rushed inside, defense squads mobilizing, non-combatants moving to secure areas. Settlement hollows being guided to protected inner chambers. Cheer issued rapid commands to her Fracken who appeared at her side, dispatching them to coordinate different aspects of the defense. Resource chamber is 3 levels down, western quadrant, she explained as they ran through the labyrinthine corridors. Recently reinforced after we consolidated crystal storage. All your eggs in one basket. Naruto observed grimly. Convenient target. Consolidated for study purposes, Cheer corrected sharply. Kimura's research indicated proximity amplifies their effects. They rounded a corner to find evidence of combat. Scorched walls, blood spatters, and 2 injured Arankar being tended by medical staff. Ahead, the distinctive sounds of battle echoed through the sea. Oradors. The high-pitched whine of Sero blasts, metal striking metal, shouts and commands. Naruto. The call came from Apache, Cheer's deer-like Fracken, who appeared from a side passage. Blood streaked one side of her face. But her expression remained fierce, determined. They broke through the secondary barriers, she reported quickly. Mila Rose is holding the main chamber entrance, but why have some kind of technology disrupting our spiritual pressure? Blasting through defenses like they're nothing. Technology. Cheer questioned sharply. Description. Small devices, circular, emit blue light when activated. Wherever they plant them, spiritual techniques weaken or fail entirely. Naruto and Tyr exchanged troubled glances. Such technology was beyond standard hollow capabilities, suggesting outside influence. We need to reach the chamber, Naruto decided. Apache, gather whatever forces you can spare to secure escape routes in case we need evacuation. The Fracken looked to Tyr, who nodded confirmation. Go, and alert Sung Sun to activate contingency protocols for the settlement hollows. As Apache disappeared to carry out her orders, Tyr and Naruto pressed forward toward the heart of the conflict. The sounds of battle intensified as they descended, spiritual pressure fluctuating wildly ahead of them. These attackers, Naruto began, connecting pieces of information. You think the dynasty provided the technology? A coordinated attack, possible, Tyr acknowledged grimly. Though Viralgo typically operates with more subtlety, this lacks his usual, theatrical elements. They emerged onto a wide balcony overlooking a massive chamber below. The sight momentarily halted them both. Utter chaos as Arankar defenders battled against humanoid attackers. In black combat gear augmented with what appeared to be hollow bone armor. The mysterious devices Apache had mentioned were visible, small blue glowing discs attached to walls and support columns throughout the space. At the chamber's center stood the crystal repository, an elaborate structure housing dozens of Naruto's crystals arranged in concentric circles. The largest specimens occupied the central pedestal. emitting harmonized pulses of energy that interacted with the surrounding formations, and moving steadily toward that center, cutting down defenders with ruthless efficiency, was a tall figure wielding twin scythe-like weapons that crackled with unnatural energy. Arturo. Tyr identified the leader, her voice hardening with recognition. Baragan loyalist, rumored to have made contact with entities beyond Hueco Mundo during the chaos following the Quincy War. Well, that explains the tech, Naruto observed grimly. How do we handle this? Tyr assessed the battlefield with centuries of combat experience. Your chains should be unaffected by the disruption devices, they operate on fundamentally different spiritual principles. I'll engage Arturo directly while you disable the devices and secure the repository. Quote. Naruto nodded, already forming shadow clone hand signs. I'll create a diversion for your approach. Unnecessary. Tyr's hand moved to her Zanpakutō, her spiritual pressure rising dramatically as she gripped the hilt. Destroy. Tiburon. Water materialized around her in a heart-shaped surge before completely enveloping her form. When it receded, Tyr's appearance had transformed dramatically, her jacket and mask fragment gone, replaced by bone-like armor covering her breasts and lower face, while her weapon had become an enormous broad-bladed sword resembling a shark's tooth. The release of her resurrection sent a shockwave through the chamber, momentarily halting all combat as combatants registered the Espada-level spiritual pressure now dominating the space. Naruto whistled softly. That works too. Without further discussion, they launched their counterattack. Tyr descended directly toward Arturo, her movement almost too fast to track as water condensed around her blade. Simultaneously, Naruto created 20 shadow clones that dispersed throughout the chamber, targeting the disruption devices while the original headed for the crystal repository. Multi-shadow clone jutsu. The clones moved with synchronized precision, each targeting specific objectives. Those assigned to the disruption devices faced immediate resistance as attackers recognized their purpose. But the sheer number of identical opponents created confusion in the enemy ranks. Naruto himself sprinted toward the repository, crimson chains manifesting around both arms as he engaged attackers blocking his path. Unlike normal combat where he might hold back, the threat to the settlement's future, represented by those crystals, unleashed to cold efficiency in his movements. Benihimo. Binding judgment. The chains extended in sweeping arcs, intercepting 3 attackers simultaneously. Unlike previous manifestations focused on restraint, these chains pierced through their targets, the spiritual energy within them automatically initiating the purification process. The attackers dissolved into particles that flowed back along the chains, leaving no trace of their existence. They were not merely a rancor, Benihimo's voice observed within Naruto's mind. Something contaminated their spiritual composition. Something artificial. Naruto had no time to process this information as he reached the repository, immediately assessing the damage. Several smaller crystals had been removed or destroyed, but the central formation remained intact, though now surrounded by more of the disruption devices planted directly on the containment barrier. Across the chamber, Tyr engaged Arturo in a display of combat mastery that momentarily captured even Naruto's attention. Her water-based attacks flowed around the disruption fields, reforming beyond their influence to strike with devastating precision. Arturo himself proved a formidable opponent, his scythes trailing sickly green energy that seemed to corrupt whatever it touched, including Tyr's water techniques. The repository is compromised, Naruto called to his nearest clones. Priority shift to central formation defense. The remaining clones converged on his position, forming a defensive perimeter while Naruto examined the disruption devices more closely. Each emitted pulses of RGY that seemed to specifically target the crystals, harmonic resonance, disrupting their stabilizing effect on the surrounding spiritual environment. These devices are not random technology, Benihimo observed. They are designed specifically to counter your crystal's effects. Someone has studied them extensively. The implication sent a chill through Naruto. Someone had anticipated not just the crystal's existence, but their specific spiritual frequency. The attack was far more targeted than a simple raid. A sudden surge of spiritual pressure from above drew his attention. A new group of attackers had entered through the upper levels, these distinctly different from the black-clad forces. They wore white uniforms with jaguar spot patterns. Dynasty warriors. Cheer! Naruto shouted in warning. We've got dynasty forces entering from above. Cheer disengaged from Arturo long enough to assess the new threat, her eyes narrowing with grim understanding. The dynasty betrays its own arrangement, she called back. Typical. Arturo used her momentary distraction to launch a vicious counterattack, one scythe slicing through Cheer's water defense to score a shallow wound across her shoulder. She responded with a precisely aimed Lagota that blasted him backward into a support column. Naruto turned his attention to the central crystal formation, recognizing that protecting it took priority over fighting enemies that continued to pour in. The largest crystal, nearly the size of his torso, pulsed with increasing instability as the disruption devices affected its resonance. There is another way, Benihimo suggested urgently, another aspect of our power waiting to be awakened. The secondary harmony. Before Naruto could question this cryptic guidance, the chamber shuddered violently as a massive Sero blast tore through the upper level, creating a gaping hole in the ceiling. Through the opening appeared Viralgo himself, his metallic form gleaming as he surveyed the chaos below with evident satisfaction. How disappointing, the Vasto Lord called down, his voice carrying easily over the battle sounds. Cooperation would have been significantly more efficient than this unpleasantness. You orchestrated this, Naruto accused, chains swirling protectively around the crystal formation. The gift was just to keep us occupied while your real forces moved into position. Perceptive. Viralgo acknowledged with a theatrical bow. Though not entirely accurate, Arturo's forces are genuinely independent, simply incentivized to create opportunity through distraction. The dynasty merely capitalizes on circumstances. Below him, the battle intensified as dynasty warriors engaged both Arturo's forces and Tyr's defenders, creating three-way combat throughout the chamber. The disruption devices continued their work, the central crystal formation now visibly destabilizing as harmonic resonance broke down. Naruto felt rage building within him, not the hot, impulsive anger of his youth, but something colder, more focused. These crystals represented hope for the settlement hollows, a chance at existence beyond endless hunger. Their destruction threatened everything he'd worked to build. Now, Benihimo urged, release the second harmony, call it forth. The voice that answered wasn't Benihimo's familiar tone, but something new, a liquid, flowing praise. NCE that had been dormant within his spiritual core. My name, it whispered. Speak my name, Knowledge flowed into Naruto's consciousness, not through instruction but through instinctive recognition. As if remembering something long forgotten. Kyoho, he breathed, the name feeling right on his lips. Ocean's embrace. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The crimson chains retracted into his body as water began materializing around him, not the heart-shaped surge of Tyr's resurrection, but concentric rings of pristine blue that spun with increasing speed. The water didn't merely gather from the atmosphere. It seemed to manifest directly from his spiritual energy, converting from one form to another. Across the chamber, Tyr faltered momentarily, her own water-based abilities nodding with the sudden manifestation of similar power. Even Viralgo's confident posture showed the first hints of uncertainty as he sensed the unfamiliar spiritual signature emerging. Second release confirmed, he called to his warriors. Acquisition priority elevated. Secure the subject alive. The water rings surrounding Naruto collapsed inward, enveloping him completely for a heartbeat before re-expanding outward in a controlled tsunami that swept through the chamber. Unlike normal water, this spiritual manifestation flowed with purpose, avoiding allies while engulfing enemies, flowing the crystal formation in protective layers, neutralizing the disruption devices as it passed over them. When the water receded, Naruto stood transformed. His appearance hadn't changed as dramatically as Tyr's resurrection, but subtle alterations were evident. His hair now contained streaks of deep blue, his eyes had shifted from cerulean to a deeper oceanic hue, and flowing patterns resembling waves had appeared on his skin like living tattoos. In his hand, a trident had manifested, not formed of solid matter but composed of compressed water that somehow maintained perfect structural integrity despite its liquid nature. Kyoho, Naruto stated again, understanding flowing through him as the second Zanpakutō's consciousness integrated with his own. The embodiment of harmony, balance, and healing. The disruption devices nearest to him sputtered and failed, their technology unable to process the fundamentally different spiritual signature now dominating the area. The crystal formation stabilized, its resonance synchronized with Naruto's new aquatic energy. Viralgo's golden eyes narrowed with calculated interest. Fascinating. Secondary Zanpakutō manifestation. Theoretically impossible, yet, he gestured sharply to his warriors. Adjust acquisition strategy. Containment Protocol 7. Dynasty warriors began drawing small devices from their uniforms, similar to the discs. Ruption technology but glowing green rather than blue. As they activated these devices, a different type of energy field began forming, attempting to create a containment barrier around Naruto. They seek to capture, not destroy. Kaiyoho's voice observed, its tone serene despite the circumstances. My waters can neutralize their technology, but complete purification requires Benihimo's chains. Then we combine, Naruto decided, reaching for both Zanpakutō spirits simultaneously. The sensation was unlike anything he'd experienced, two distinct spiritual entities harmonizing within his soul. Their powers flowing together rather than competing. Crimson chains began emerging from the swirling waters surrounding him, the two manifestations enhancing rather than impeding each other. Impossible, Viralgo breathed, genuine shock replacing his usual calculated demeanor. Simultaneous dual manifestation without conflict. Chie, still engaged with Arturo but witnessing Naruto's transformation, seized the opportunity created by her opponent's distraction. Her blade swept through Arturo's defense, severing one arm at the shoulder. As he howled in pain, she followed with a precisely aimed arrow that blasted through his chest, dissolving his form into particles. With their leader destroyed, Arturo's remaining forces began retreating, using the ongoing chaos to cover their escape. The dynasty warriors, however, pressed their attack with renewed determination, their containment devices creating an increasingly complex network around Naruto. They cannot contain what they do not understand, Kaiyoho advised calmly. Show them our true nature. Naruto raised the liquid trident, channeling his combined chakra and spiritual energy through the weapon. The water surrounding him began to glow with internal light, while the crimson chains extended outward, interweaving with the aquatic energy. Ocean chain binding. Purification wave. The combined technique released as a horizontal tsunami of glowing water wrapped in crimson chain networks. As it swept through the chamber, it differentiated with impossible precision, passing harmlessly through allies while consuming enemies. Unlike Benihimo's purification alone, this combined technique worked faster, more efficiently, converting the spiritual energy of those it touched into purified particles that flowed back toward the crystal formation. The dynasty containment devices shorted out instantly, unable to process the hybrid spiritual signature. Viralgo himself barely avoided the technique, his supernatural speed carrying him back through the ceiling breach. Remarkable, his voice echoed as he retreated. The dynasty concedes this encounter, Maelstrom Reaper. But acquisition efforts will continue. Potential of this magnitude cannot remain uncontrolled. As the purification wave completed its circuit of the chamber, it returned to Naruto, spiraling inward before being absorbed back into his body. The liquid trident dissolved, the wave patterns on his skin fading as both Zanpakutō manifestations retracted to their dormant state within his spiritual core. Exhaustion hit immediately, maintaining dual manifestat. Ion had drained his reserves more quickly than anticipated. He staggered slightly, steadying himself against the crystal formation which now glowed with renewed stability, the purified energy from the defeated attackers having been absorbed into its structure. Chie approached, her own resurrection released as she returned to her normal form. Despite the wound on her shoulder and various minor injuries, she moved with dignified composure. A second Zanpakutō, she observed, her tone carefully neutral though her eyes revealed intense interest. Complementary to the first rather than conflicting. Unprecedented. Wasn't exactly planned, Naruto admitted, his breathing still labored from the exertion. Kaiyoho was waiting for the right moment, I guess. Kaiyoho, Chie repeated, a trace of irony in her voice. Ocean's embrace. Water-based abilities that resonate with my own Tiburon. Coincidental, I'm sure. Before Naruto could respond to the subtle implication, Hinata arrived with Nell perched on her shoulders. The veins around Hinata's eyes were more pronounced than ever, suggesting she'd been pushing her Byakugan to monitor the entire conflict from elsewhere in the fortress. The attackers are retreating on all fronts, she reported, setting Nell down gently. No signs of reinforcements, though scattered groups remain in the upper levels. Naruto. Nell launched herself at him, seemingly unconcerned by his exhausted state or the destruction surrounding them. You were all whoosh and splashy and the bad guys went poof. Despite his fatigue, Naruto managed a smile at her enthusiasm. Thanks for the technical breakdown, Nell. Cheers. Fracken appeared next, coordinating cleanup operations and damage assessment with practiced efficiency. Mila Rose approached her leader directly, her expression grave. 17 defenders lost, she reported tersely. 32 wounded, 8 critically. Kimura is overseeing medical response. The settlement hollows are secure in the inner chambers, though several were injured during the initial breach. Chie acknowledged this with a solemn nod before turning back to Naruto. Your second manifestation changed the strategic landscape considerably. The dynasty will reconsider direct confrontation, though their interest will only intensify. And Arturo's faction? Naruto asked, temporarily decimated with his destruction, though his lieutenants will eventually regroup. Chie's expression hardened slightly. More concerning is the technology they deployed. The disruption devices were specifically calibrated to the crystal's harmonic frequency. Information they couldn't have obtained without inside access. The implication hung between them, betrayal from within their own ranks. We'll deal with that later, Naruto decided, looking around at the damaged chamber. Right now, we need to secure the crystals, treat the wounded, and strengthen our defenses against follow-up attacks. Hinata stepped closer, her Byakugan still active despite the obvious pain it caused her. The crystals have changed, she observed, studying the central formation. Their energy pattern is more complex now, layered with both Benihimo and Kyoho's signatures. Naruto approached the formation, placing his hand on the largest crystal. It responded immediately, pulsing with harmonized energy that flowed up his arm in visible currents of crimson and blue. The dual awakening accelerates their potential, both Zanpakutō voices observed simultaneously in his mind. What was dormant now quickens. They're stabilizing, Naruto confirmed, feeling the change through his connection. Growing stronger. The purification energy from the attackers accelerated something in their development. Development toward what end? Chie questioned, her analytical mind always seeking strategic implications. Naruto shook his head, not yet certain himself. Something constructive. A foundation. Nell tugged at his torn jacket, her expression suddenly serious despite her childish features. Nell remembers something. About crystals and the old kings. All attention turned to the small Arankar, whose fractured memories occasionally yielded surprisingly valuable information. What kings, Nell? Naruto encouraged gently. Before the Hollow King. Before the Spirit King. Nell's voice took on an oddly formal cadence, as if reciting something once memorized. 5 pillars held the worlds in harmony. 5 thrones maintained the balance. When they shattered, the dimensions drifted apart, and hunger entered the void between. Chie and Naruto exchanged startled glances. The implications of Nell's words resonating with other fragments they'd encountered. Benihimo's reference to Naruto becoming a bridge between worlds, the ancient text in Viralgo's bone box. The growing stability in areas where crystals were established. Nell, Hinata asked carefully, kneeling to the small Arankar's level, where did you learn that? Nell's brow furrowed in concentration. Nell doesn't remember learning it. Nell just knows it. Like how Nell knows her name is really Nelliel tu Odelschwenk. Her eyes widened in surprise at her own words. Oh, Nell remembered her whole name. The moment of breakthrough was interrupted as Sung Sun appeared via Sonido, her normally composed demeanor visibly shaken. Lady Haribel, she reported urgently. Something is happening in the outer settlement. The crystals there are changing. Changing how? Chie demanded. Growing. Spreading. The sand around them is transforming somehow. Naruto straightened despite his exhaustion. I need to see this. You're in no condition for further exertion, Hinata objected, concern evident in her voice. This isn't optional, Naruto countered, already moving toward the exit. If the outer crystals are responding to what happened here, we need to understand why. The whole settlement could be affected. Chie nodded in agreement. Mila rose. Continue coordinating recovery here. Sung-sun, alert Kimura to prepare for possible anomalies affecting the settlement hollows. Apache, with me, as they made their way through the fortress toward the outer settlement. Naruto felt both Zanpakutō spirits stirring within him, their previously distinct presences now partially harmonized after their joint manifestation. This was always the path, they communicated together. Awakening, harmonization, foundation, foundation for what? Naruto questioned internally. The answer came not in words but in impressions, stability where chaos had reigned. Connection where separation had persisted, growth where stagnation had dominated for millennia. They emerged from Las Noches to find the outer settlement transformed. The previously barren sans-sur, rounding the strategic crystal placements had changed texture completely, hardening into a substance resembling polished stone in some areas, sprouting unusual vegetation in others. The crystals themselves had grown substantially, some now towering like miniature obelisks emitting harmonized pulses of crimson and blue energy. The settlement hollows had gathered around these formations, their usual chaotic spiritual signatures showing unprecedented synchronization. Minnow stood at the center, his massive form silhouetted against the largest crystal growth. Maelstrom Reaper, he greeted Naruto as they approached. The hunger fades. The void within us fills with something else. Naruto extended his senses, feeling the change Minnows described. The constant spiritual hunger that defined Allo existence was being systematically replaced with something more structured, more stable. They're evolving, Hinata observed with her Byakugan. Not into Rancor, something different. Their ritual network is reorganizing around the crystal resonance. Cheer moved among the transformed landscape with uncharacteristic caution, her scientific curiosity momentarily overcoming her usual reserve. The spiritual environment itself is changing, becoming more hospitable. Nell bounced excitedly from crystal to crystal, apparently unaffected by the transformation. It feels like home, but not like Hueco Mundo home. Like before home. Before home, Naruto questioned. Before Nell was Nell, she tried to explain, gesturing expansively. Before anything was anything. While cryptic, her excitement was contagious. The settlement hollows moved with new purpose, arranging themselves around the crystal formations in patterns that somehow felt significant, meaningful. Naruto approached the central crystal, now nearly twice his height and pulsing with synchronized energy. As his hand touched its surface, knowledge flowed into him, not discrete information but comprehensive understanding. It's a foundation stone, he breathed in wonder. The beginning of reconstruction. Reconstruction of what? Cheer questioned sharply. Naruto turned to her, his expression reflecting the enormity of what he'd glimpsed. Of the connection between dimensions. The pathways that once allowed travel between realms without tears or rifts. The crystals aren't weapons or tools, they're seeds for a new network. Hinata's Byakugan focused on the crystal, her perception extending beyond normal limits despite the pain it caused her. I can see it, she confirmed, wonder in her voice. The pattern extends beyond physical space, creating stabilization points in the dimensional membrane. Cheer's analytical mind immediately grasped the strategic implications. Control of such a network would mentally alter the balance of power between Soul Society, Hueco Mundo, and the human world. It's not about control, Naruto corrected, understanding flowing through him from both Zanpakutō spirits. It's about restoration, healing damage done millennia ago when the original pathways shattered. Nell told you, the small Arankar insisted, tugging at Cheer's jacket. 5 pillars held the worlds in harmony. 5 thrones maintained the balance. Cheer studied Naruto with new intensity, reassessing everything in light of these developments. And you just happened to manifest multiple Zanpakutō corresponding to these ancient pillars. Not coincidence, Naruto acknowledged, the pieces aligning in his mind. When I crossed dimensions during the battle with Kagaya, something resonated with dormant spiritual frameworks here in Hueco Mundo. My chakra, especially Kurama's chakra, matched frequency patterns established long ago. Meaning what, exactly? Cheer pressed. Meaning, Naruto replied, watching as the transformed landscape continued to spread outward from the central crystal, that we've just become significantly more interesting to every power in every connected dimension. And significantly more vulnerable, Hinata added quietly, her Byakugan scanning the horizon where scattered spiritual pressures indicated word of the transformation was already spreading across Hueco Mundo. Naruto looked out over the settlement, where hollows moved with newfound purpose among the transformed environment. Crystalline structures emerging from the ground resembled the beginnings of buildings, while the hardened pathways between formed the rudimentary layout of streets or thoroughfares. What had been a collection of makeshift shelters was evolving into the foundation of an actual city. You were right, he conceded to Tyr, about formalization, structure, deliberate application. This isn't something I can approach casually anymore. Tyr's expression remained carefully neutral, though satisfaction glinted in her aqua eyes. Then you accept the necessity of the council concept. Official recognition of your position. Yes, Naruto agreed, though determination hardened his features. But not just as a political figurehead or military alliance. If these crystals really are rebuilding ancient connections between dimensions, then what we're creating here goes beyond Hueco Mundo politics. A rare smile touched Tyr's lips, visible despite her high collar. Desert throne, she mused, gesturing to the crystalline formation at the settlement's center, which had indeed taken on a vaguely throne-like configuration. Appropriate symbolism for a new beginning. Naruto grimaced at the title's implications. I didn't come here looking for a throne. Few worthy of rulership do. Tyr observed with unexpected wisdom. Those who seek power for its own sake rarely wield it well. As night deepened across Hueco Mundo, though darkness and light held little meaning are the eternal crescent moon, the transformation continued. Crystals pulsed with harmonized energy, reshaping the barren landscape into something new, something that hadn't existed in this realm for countless millennia. Naruto stood at the center of it all, watching as his accidental arrival in this dimension catalyzed changes beyond anything he could have anticipated. Hinata remained beside him, her quiet strength a constant despite the physical toll her evolving Byakugan extracted. Nell bounced between crystal formations, her fractured memories occasionally yielding fragments of ancient DGE that suddenly seemed critically important. And throughout Las Noches and beyond, word spread of the desert throne rising from the sand, of the Maelstrom Reaper who commanded both Crimson Chains O.F. Judgment and Azure Waters of Transformation, of a new power emerging in Hueco Mundo that promised something beyond eternal hunger and endless battle. The foundations had been laid. Whether they WOULD support a bridge between worlds or merely another battlefield remained to be seen. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, The Soul Reaper's Dilemma. Cherry blossoms drifted across Sokyoku Hill, their delicate pin-K petals contrasting sharply with the grave expressions of the assembled captains. 13 court guard squad meetings typically adhered to strict protocols, but today's gathering had been hastily arranged, formality sacrificed for urgency. Captain Commander Kiraku adjusted his straw hat, a deceptively casual gesture that did nothing to diminish the seriousness in his single visible eye. I believe we're all here. Captain Kuretsuchi, your report please. Mayuri Kuretsuchi stepped forward, his black and white face paint accentuating his perpetual grimace. Behind him floated a projection screen materializing from seemingly nowhere, displaying complex spiritual energy readings. 3 weeks ago, our monitoring systems detected a dimensional anomaly in Hueco Mundo, he began, voice clipped with scientific precision. Initially dismissed as residual instability from the Quincy War, subsequent readings revealed a pattern inconsistent with normal decay signatures. The screen shifted to display a map of Hueco Mundo with pulsing concentrations of energy highlighted in various locations. These energy signatures are unlike anything in our records, Kuretsuchi continued. Neither pure hollow nor Shinigami in nature, yet containing elements of both. Most disturbingly, they appear to be altering the fundamental spiritual composition of Hueco Mundo itself. Captain Hitsugaya frowned, arms crossed over his chest. Altering how, exactly? Stabilizing it. Kuretsuchi's tone suggested he found this development personally offensive. Areas exhibiting these energy signatures show 78% reduction in dimensional fluctuation, 63% decrease in spiritual degradation, and most alarmingly, organized concentration of hollow spiritual pressure without corresponding predation patterns. Whole, lows gathering without eating each other. Captain Hirako raised a skeptical eyebrow. That's impossible. Their hunger drives them to consume. It's their fundamental nature. Hence my use of the term, alarming. Kuretsuchi replied testily. Something or someone is systematically restructuring the spiritual ecosystem of Hueco Mundo. My analysis suggests intervention from an entity possessing neither pure Shinigami nor hollow Ryutsu, but a hybrid form previously undocumented. Captain Rukia Kuchiki stepped forward, her newly acquired captain's haori still stiff with newness. Could this be related to Ichigo Kurisaki's hybrid nature? Perhaps another substitute Shinigami manifestation. Kurisaki's spiritual signature remains under observation in Karakura town, Kuretsuchi dismissed. This is distinctly different. Furthermore, reconnaissance indicates a centralizing pattern around what was formerly Las Noches, with Tyr Harabel's faction apparently allied with this unknown entity. The screen shifted again to satellite images showing structural changes around Las Noches, new crystalline formations, organized settlement patterns, and what appeared to be rudimentary fortifications. Most concerning, Kuretsuchi concluded, these stabilization points appear to be creating something resembling a Senkaimon framework, a potential gateway system outside Soul Society's authority or monitoring capabilities. A murmur ran through the assembled captains. Unsanctioned gateways between dimensions represented a security breach of the highest order. Captain Commander Kiraku stroked his stubbled chin thoughtfully. Recommendations. Immediate investigation team. Captain Sui Feng interjected before Kuretsuchi could respond. Stealth force can infiltrate and neutralize if necessary. Neutralize what, exactly? Captain Hirako challenged. We don't even know what we're dealing with. Which is precisely why elimination should remain a viable option, she countered coldly. Rukia stepped forward again, her expression determined despite her junior status among the captains. I volunteer to lead an investigative team. My division specializes in dimensional anomalies, and my previous experience in Hueco Mundo provides tactical advantages. You've been a captain for barely 6 months, Sui Feng objected. This requires seasoned leadership. On the contrary, Kiraku interjected, his casual tone belying careful consideration. Captain Kuchiki's experience with anomalous spiritual entities, particularly her history with Ichigo Kurosaki, makes her uniquely qualified. Additionally, her status as a newer captain might present a less threatening diplomatic presence should negotiation prove viable. Rukia bowed slightly, surprised but grateful for the captain commander's support. I would request Lieutenant Abarai accompany the mission. His Bankai's adaptability could prove valuable in unpredictable conditions. Granted, Kiraku nodded. Assemble a small team. Emphasis on investigation, not confrontation. We need information before making policy decisions. And if this anomaly proves hostile, Sui Feng pressed, then you'll get your elimination order, Kiraku replied, his tone hardening slightly, but not before diplomatic options are exhausted. The last thing the Soul Society needs is another interdimensional conflict while we're still rebuilding from the Quincy War. The meeting concluded with operational details assigned to relevant divisions. As captains dispersed, Rukia remained behind, examining the projected images with growing concern. Troubled, Captain Kuchiki, Kiraku asked, joining her by the display. Something feels familiar about these energy patterns, she admitted. Like I've encountered something similar before, but I can't place when or where. Kiraku studied her thoughtfully. Trust those instincts. They're often more reliable than our scientific instrumentation. He gestured toward the crystalline formations visible in the images. Whatever's happening in Hueco Mundo represents significant change. Change brings opportunity or threat, sometimes both simultaneously. You believe there's potential for positive outcomes? Rukia asked, surprised. The current arrangement between dimensions has persisted for millennia, Kiraku replied, gaze distant. That doesn't necessarily make it optimal or inevitable. History is filled with necessary evolutions. His cryptic statement lingered in Rukia's mind as she departed to assemble her team. Something profound was unfolding in Hueco Mundo, something that resonated with deeper patterns than mere political disruption. Why, then, did she feel as if she were being drawn into a story that had been waiting for her all along? The council chamber of Las Noches bore little resemblance to its previous incarnation under Aizen's reign. Gone were the stark minimalist designs and intimidating throne. In their place stood a circular arrangement of seats surrounding a crystalline table that pulsed with gentle luminescence. The walls themselves had been partially transmuted by the spreading crystal network, creating an environment that felt more organic than artificial. Cheer Haribel observed the gathered representatives with carefully maintained neutrality. 5 weeks of intensive diplomacy had yielded this unprecedented assembly, a rancor from 3 different factions. Evolved hollows from the outer settlements, and even representatives from the mysterious forest enclave who had emerged from isolation upon hearing rumors of the desert throne. At the table's head sat Naruto. His appearance subtly changed since the battle for the crystal repository. Streaks of crimson and azure now permanently highlighted his blonde hair, while his eyes shifted between cerulean and deeper hues depending on which aspect of his power manifested. Though he'd rejected formal regalia, he wore a modified haori over his traditional shinobi attire, white with wave-like patterns that shifted between crimson and blue. The Eastern Buffer Zone reports 18 incursions this week, reported Apache, referring to notes with uncharacteristic formality. All successfully repelled without casualties. Settlement expansion continues at projected rates, with 17 new structures completed and 43 hollows successfully transitioning to stabilized forms. Resource allocation. Naruto prompted. Sung Sun stepped forward, her serpentine grace unchanged despite her new role as economic coordinator. Crystal production maintains sufficient output for current needs, though expansion to southern territories will require increased generation. The Human World Salvage teams report 76% acquisition success on required materials. The meeting continued with methodical efficiency, each representative reporting on their sector's progress and challenges. Cheer noted with professional admiration how quickly Naruto had adapted to administrative leadership, his natural charisma bolstered by genuine interest in details other rulers might delegate entirely. Hinata sat to Naruto's right, her Byakugan activated despite the lingering pain it clearly caused her. The Hyug, a heiress, had assumed responsibility for security coordination, her visual prowess providing invaluable intelligence despite its physical toll. The veins around her eyes had become permanently more pronounced, while streaks of white now highlighted her indigo hair, physical manifestations of her adaptation to Hueco Mundo's spiritual environment. The southwestern quadrant requires attention, she noted during a discussion of perimeter defenses. The crystal network there shows destabilization patterns consistent with external interference. Dynasty probes, Cheer suggested. Their technologists. TS continue attempts to disrupt our harmonization fields. Naruto nodded thoughtfully. We'll reinforce the area with a secondary crystal matrix. Minnows, can your settlement provide the necessary anchoring positions? The massive hollow-turned administrator inclined his horned head. We have 14 evolved Ajukas ready for perimeter duty. With proper harmonization crystals, they can maintain the necessary resonance. As the meeting progressed to discussing newly arriving hollows seeking protection, Cheer found her attention drawn to the subtle dynamics between Naruto and his closest advisors. Particularly interesting was the evolving relationship between the shinobi and herself. What had begun as pragmatic alliance had shifted into something more complex, professional respect layered with growing personal connection. His dual Zanpakutō manifestations resonated with her own water-based powers, creating moments of unexpected synchronicity during joint operations. More surprising was how comfortably she had adapted to sharing authority after centuries of rigid hierarchy under Aizen and subsequent independent leadership. Equally notable was the deepening bond between Naruto and Hinata. Their connection had been evident from the beginning, her dimensional crossing pursuit speaking to devotion beyond ordinary loyalty, but it had matured into something more profound. They moved in unconscious harmony, anticipating each other's thoughts and complementing each other's strengths. When exhaustion from her Byakugan use overwhelmed her, his presence seemed to stabilize her spiritual pressure. When his impetuosity threatened balanced decisions, her quiet counsel grounded him. Most remarkable, Cheer reflected, was the absence of conflict between these evolving connections. Human relationship dynamics typically demanded exclusivity, yet the unusual circumstances of their situation had created something more fluid, more adapted to their unique needs and challenges. The council meeting concluded with assignments distributed and next steps established. As representatives departed, Naruto remained at the table, studying a holographic display of Los Noches and surrounding territories that Kimura's research division had developed using crystal technology. The Soul Society will respond soon, Cheer observed, joining him at the display. Our activities have grown too significant to escape their notice. I'm counting on it, Naruto replied, surprising her. Isolation serves no one's interests. If we're really rebuilding connections between dimensions, all realms need representation eventually. Most Urankar would consider Shinigami natural enemies, she cautioned. Ancient hatreds don't dissolve easily. Neither did hollow hunger, he countered, gesturing toward the display's outer settlements where hundreds of previously predatory hollows now coexisted in stable community. Yet here we are. Hinata joined them, her Byakugan finally deactivated though the strain remained evident in her posture. The southwestern disturbance bears watching. It feels different from typical dynasty probes, more subtle, more precise. Soul Society reconnaissance, Cheer suggested. Perhaps, Hinata agreed. The spiritual signature contains elements consistent with Shinigami Ryutsu, but modified somehow, suppressed or disguised. Naruto considered this information thoughtfully. If they're observing rather than attacking, that's potentially positive. Let them watch. What we're building here speaks for itself. Optimistic as always, Cheer noted, though without her former skepticism. The weeks of successful implementation had earned Naruto's idealism more credibility, even among hardened pragmatists like herself. Speaking of building, Hinata interjected, changing subjects. Nell reports unusual activity in the crystalline forest. The trees appear to be rearranging themselves, creating patterns she says, look like home. Another memory fragment surfacing, Naruto asked. Possibly. She becomes more articulate when describing these patterns, almost as if accessing a different aspect of herself. Hinata's expression revealed concern beneath her report. The transitions are becoming more frequent, more jarring. Yesterday she shifted between child and adult forms 3 times during a single conversation. Naruto frowned. Kimura mentioned her spiritual pressure is destabilizing. The crystal network may be accelerating her recovery, forcing fragmented aspects to reconcile. She mentioned wanting to show you something at the forest center, Hinata continued. Something about the old writing coming back. Cheer's interest sharpened immediately. Old writing. Her exact words. Yes. She seemed excited rather than frightened, but insistent. That Naruto specifically needed to see it. Naruto and Cheer exchanged significant glances. Nell's fragmentary memories had repeatedly yielded valuable insights into ancient aspects of Hueco Mundo, connections that predated current understanding of the spiritual realms. The research expedition to the Manos forest ruins departs in 3 hours, Cheer noted. We could divert to include the crystalline forest in our survey. Good idea. Naruto turned to Hinata. Will you join us? Your Byakugan could identify structural aspects invisible to normal perception. Hinata hesitated, unconsciously touching the veins around her eyes. I should remain here. The southwestern disturbance requires monitoring, and using the Byakugan in the crystalline forest last time was overwhelming. The forest's unique spiritual composition had triggered cascading sensory overload during her previous visit. Too many dimensional layers simultaneously visible, creating pain beyond even her considerable tolerance. Naruto nodded understanding, momentarily resting his hand on hers in a gesture both supportive and affectionate. Keep me updated on any changes. We'll maintain communication through the crystal network. As they finalized expedition details, none noticed the small black cat observing from a concealed position near the chamber's upper vent. Yoruichi, continuing her extended reconnaissance mi. Seijin with growing fascination for the unprecedented developments. 3 hours later, the expedition departed Las Noches, Naruto and Cheer leading a team that included Nell, Kimura for scientific documentation, and a security detail of evolved Urankar. Their destination, the mysterious crystalline forest where Nell claimed ancient writings had begun to reappear. Rukia Kuchiki moved through the crystalline forest with practiced stealth, her spiritual pressure suppressed to near undetectable levels. Behind her, Renji Abarai and 3 specialized reconnaissance team members maintained similar concealment, their black stealth uniforms blending with the shadows between luminous trees. These formations are unlike anything in our records, whispered the team's spiritual analyst, carefully collecting samples from a crystal outcropping. They're not mere geological structures, they're responding to spiritual pressure, adapting their configuration. Growing toward us, Renji observed uneasily, as nearby crystal facets subtly reoriented in their direction. Like they're aware. Rukia signaled for silence as distant voices reached them. The expedition they'd been tracking for the past hour was approaching their position. She gestured for the team to adopt concealment positions among the higher crystal branches. From their elevated vantage point, they observed the approaching group with keen interest. At its center walked the anomaly they'd been sent to investigate, a young man with distinctive blonde hair streaked with crimson and blue, wearing a modified white houri over orange and black clothing unlike any Rukia had encountered in Soul Society or the human world. Target confirmed, murmured their analyst. Spiritual pressure signature matches monitoring station records, hybrid composition, unprecedented density. Rukia focused her attention on the anomaly's companions. Most recognizable was Tyr Haribel, former Espada whose faction had maintained uneasy neutrality with Soul Society since the Quincy War. Beside her walked a small Arankar child with green hair and a cracked mask, something about her naggingly familiar to Rukia, though she couldn't immediately place why. The remainder of the group included what appeared to be a scientist-type Arankar carrying sophisticated monitoring equipment and several combat-ready Arankar maintaining protective formation. They're well organized, Renji noted with professional assessment. Disciplined. These aren't typical hollows or even standard Arankar. Their movement patterns suggest actual military training. Rukia nodded agreement, continuing her observation as the expedition halted in a small clearing. The anomaly, identified in their briefing as Naruto Uzumaki, knelt to examine crystal formations while conversing with the child Arankar. Nell remembers this place being different, the small Arankar was saying, her childish voice carrying clearly in the forest's unusual acoustics. The crystals used to form a big circle with 5 special trees in the middle. And the writing was all over the trunks. Writing in what language? Uzumaki asked, his tone patient and genuinely interested. Nell doesn't know what it's called. But Nell could read it. In Nell's dreams, Nell still can. Haribel approached, examining the formations with analytical precision. These crystal arrangements appear deliberate. Concentric circles extending outward from a central point. Consistent with ceremonial configurations in ancient spiritual architectures. Like a temple, Uzumaki suggested. Or a seal, Haribel replied more ominously. Kimura. Analysis. The scientist Arankar activated sophisticated equipment that projected scanning fields over the area. Extraordinary spiritual density at the formation center. These crystals aren't merely growing, they're reconstituting themselves into a predetermined pattern. Returning to an original configuration. Like they remember what they're supposed to be. Nell exclaimed excitedly. Precisely. Kimura agreed, adjusting his glasses. These structures contain something analogous to spiritual memory, imprinted patterns reactivating in response to the harmonic resonance from Las Noches. From her concealed position, Rukia signaled her team to record everything, focusing their specialized equipment on the crystal formations. Whatever was happening here early connected to the broader anomalies they'd been sent to investigate. Below, the expedition continued deeper into the forest, following crystal patterns that grew increasingly organized, less natural formation. More deliberate architecture. Rukia and her team shadowed their movement, maintaining careful distance to avoid detection. The forest's center, when they reached it, drew gasps from both expeditions. 5 enormous crystal trees arranged in perfect pentagonal formation dominated a circular clearing. Unlike the other crystalline growths, these pulsed with internal light that shifted through spectral colors in synchronized patterns. Between them, the ground had transformed into a platform of smooth crystal engraved with intricate symbols. This is it, Nell exclaimed, bouncing excitedly. The Circle of Remembrance. Nell remembers now. Circle of Remembrance, Uzumaki questioned, stepping carefully onto the platform. As his foot touched the surface, the engravings illuminated, responding to his presence. Concentric rings of symbols spread outward from his position, flowing like liquid light across the platform. The writing, Haribel breathed, uncharacteristic wonder in her voice. It's activating. Not just activating, Kimura corrected, his instruments displaying frantic readings. It's translating itself, adapting to be comprehensible to our perception. Rukia leaned forward, fascination overcoming caution as the symbols resolved into recognizable forms, not quite written language but conceptual representations that conveyed meaning directly to the observer's mind. 5 thrones, she whispered. The meaning somehow clear despite the alien symbology. 5 elements in harmony. You can read it. Renji whispered back, surprised. Not exactly reading. More like, understanding. Rukia tried to explain, the sensation unlike anything she'd experienced before. It's communicating directly, bypassing language. Below, Uzumaki had moved to the platform's center, where 5 distinct symbols pulsed with increasing brightness. As he approached, crimson chains materialized around his arms, the ability mentioned in their intelligence briefings. Simultaneously, swirling water began forming around his feet, creating a secondary manifestation that their reports hadn't documented. Dual Zanpakutō manifestation, their analyst breathed in disbelief. Oh, see occurring simultaneously without conflict. The platform responded to these manifestations, 2 of the 5 symbols brightening further while the others remained dormant. Uzumaki knelt, placing one hand on each activated symbol. I can read it, he announced to his companions. Or, feel it, somehow. This place was a nexus point, a connection between dimensions where representatives from 5 realms would gather. The symbols represent elements: fire, water, earth, lightning, and void. The fundamental forces that maintain dimensional separation, Kimura theorized, recording everything. Consistent with ancient texts referencing the original barrier creation. Nell approached carefully, her childish features showing unusual solemnity. The 5 kings sat on 5 thrones and kept the hungry shadows away. But then they fought and the thrones broke and the shadows came through the cracks. Kings? Haribel questioned sharply. Not exactly kings, Uzumaki corrected, still connected to the platform. More like guardians, maintainers of balance. They didn't rule, they served. As he spoke, the platform's illumination intensified, and something remarkable occurred. The small Aaron, Nell, began to glow with resonant energy. Her form blurred, spiritual pressure fluctuating wildly before stabilizing at a much higher density. When the light receded, a transformed figure stood in the child's place. An adult woman with flowing green hair and a cracked mask fragment still visible on her head, her body now mature and clad in tattered remnants of what had once been an Espada uniform. Her expression showed momentary confusion before clarity dawned. I remember, she stated, her voice no longer childish but measured and precise. I am Neliel II Odelschwenk, former Trace Espada under Aizen Sosuke. This place, I discovered it during an exploration mission centuries ago. The writings activated partially then as well, though not to this extent. Rukia's eyes widened in recognition. Neliel, one of the original Espada, reportedly killed years before Rukia had ever encountered the Arankar hierarchy. Her presence here, apparently transformed from the child form, represented yet another unprecedented anomaly. Neliel, Haribel acknowledged formally, though surprise was evident in her usually composed features. Your memories have returned. Partially, Neliel confirmed, approaching the platform with newfound grace. Fragments still elude me, particularly surrounding my injury and transformation. But this place, she gestured to the illuminated symbols. Its significance is clearer now. When I first discovered it, I reported the findings to Aizen. He ordered it sealed and forgotten, claiming it represented obsolete spiritual architecture with no tactical value. He lied, Uzumaki stated with certainty, still connected to the platform. He recognized its importance but wanted no one else to understand it. This nexus predates Soul Society itself, maybe even the Soul King. This statement sent a jolt of alarm through Rukia. Soul Society doctrine held that nothing predated the Soul King's establishment of dimensional order. To suggest otherwise approached heresy, yet the evidence surrounding them challenged fundamental assumptions. The platform is responding to your specific spiritual signature, Kimura noted, scanning Uzumaki's interaction with the symbols. Your dual Zanpakutō manifestation activates 2 of the 5 elemental anchors, fire and water, and the other 3 remain dormant, Haribel observed, suggesting they await different spiritual signatures. Uzumaki finally removed his hands from the symbols, standing as the platform's illumination dimmed to a steady glow rather than active communication. There's more information encoded here, but it's not accessible yet. The Nexus is still recovering, rebuilding itself from some ancient damage. Damage consistent with a deliberate attempt to destroy it, Kimura suggested, examining edge patterns. These fracture lines aren't natural degradation, they show impact patterns from concentrated spiritual attack. Someone tried to erase this place from existence, Neliel concluded. Her analytical mind evidently functioning despite her recent transformation. Yet it persisted, dormant until now. She turned to Uzumaki with newfound intensity. Your arrival triggered its reactivation. Your specific spiritual composition resonates with its fundamental framework. Which raises the critical question, Haribel interjected, ever the strategist, of whether it's reactive. Aishin will draw attention from whoever attempted its destruction originally. The clearing fell silent as this ominous possibility settled over the expedition. Rukia exchanged glances with Renji, Bot H, recognizing the profound implications of what they were witnessing. This went far beyond unusual hollow behavior or anomalous spiritual signatures. It suggested a fundamental rewriting of understood dimensional history. We should document everything before returning to Las Noches, Uzumaki decided, breaking the silence. Kimura, comprehensive scans of the entire platform and surrounding structures. Neliel, record anything else you remember about this place from your previous discovery. As the expedition spread out to begin documentation, Rukia signaled her team to withdraw to a safer distance. They needed to process this information and determine appropriate next steps. This discovery significantly altered their assessment parameters. This goes way beyond our briefing scope, Renji whispered as they retreated. Structures predating the Soul King. Dimensional connections outside established channels. The Central 46 will have a collective seizure. More importantly, Rukia responded quietly. Uzumaki clearly isn't hostile. He's investigating and documenting, not weaponizing. His interactions with both Arankar and the crystals show cooperative intent rather than domination. His dual Zanpakutō manifestation is unprecedented, their analyst added. The simultaneous expression of two distinct spiritual aspects should be impossible according to established theory. Ruki considered this as they established a new observation position. We need more information before reporting back. Let's continue monitoring their expedition and. Her instruction cut short as a distinctive sound reached them, the static discharge of a garganta opening nearby. They tensed, weapons ready as they scanned for the source. Below in the clearing, the expedition had also detected the disturbance. Haribel and the security detail moved into defensive formation around Uzumaki and the research team, weapons drawn. 3 gargantas materialized simultaneously at equidistant points around the clearing. Black tiers in reality that widened to disgorge figures in white uniforms with jaguar spot patterns. Dynasty forces, Renji identified, recognizing them from their intelligence briefings. Significant numbers, at least 30 combatants. The Dynasty warriors formed organized ranks as their leader stepped forward, a metallic-skinned Vasto lord with a complete jaguar skull mask. High spiritual pressure radiated ancient power, dense and predatory. How predictable, the leader called out, his voice carrying the grinding quality of metal against metal. The anomaly discovers a nexus point, and immediately begins activating dormant systems without understanding the consequences. Viralgo, Haribel acknowledged coldly, her hand on her Zanpakutō. Your territorial incursions grow tedious. This territory belonged to the dynasty when your kind still crawled as mindless hollows in the sands, Viralgo replied dismissively. The circle of remembrance has always been under our protection. Strange protection that left it dormant and forgotten, Uzumaki challenged, stepping forward despite his companion's protective stances. You know what this place is. What it represents. Better than you possibly could. Dimensional interloper. Viralgo's golden eyes gleamed with predatory focus. Did you think the dynasty wouldn't notice your systematic activation of the ancient network? The crystals, the harmonization fields, the stabilization of hollow evolution, all steps toward reconstructing what was deliberately dismantled. Dismantled by whom? Uzumaki pressed. By those wise enough to recognize the danger of unrestricted dimensional access, Viralgo replied. A lesson apparently requiring regular reinforcement. From their observation position, Rukia signaled her team to remain concealed but ready. The confrontation below had potential to escalate rapidly, yet also represented a valuable intelligence-gathering opportunity as both factions revealed information. The Nexus system created stability, Uzumaki argued, crimson chains beginning to materialize around his arms in response to the growing tension. The records here show 5 realms in balance, connected through regulated pathways. A charming historical fiction, Viralgo dismissed with a metallic laugh. The reality proved considerably messier. But such details matter little now. The dynasty has maintained stewardship over dimensional knowledge since the original fracture. Your interference ends today. The dynasty forces began advancing in coordinated formation, weapons drawn. Harry Bell's security detail tightened their defensive perimeter, while Neliel moved to a strategic position beside Uzumaki, her hand reaching for a Zanpakutō that wasn't visibly present, muscle memory from her former life reasserting itself. "We didn't come seeking conflict," Uzumaki stated firmly, his chains now fully manifested and swirling around him in complex patterns. "But we won't surrender, no. Ledge that benefits all realms to those who would hoard it." Noble sentiment, Viralgo mocked, his own spiritual pressure rising visibly around him in metallic waves. How unfortunate that nobility rarely survives contact with historical reality. Without further warning, he launched forward with blinding speed, claws extended toward Uzumaki's chest. Simultaneously, his warriors engaged Haribel's security detail in coordinated attack patterns. What happened next demonstrated why Uzumaki had become such a significant anomaly in Hueco Mundo's power structure. As Viralgo struck, both Zanpakutō manifestations activated simultaneously, crimson chains intercepting the claws while water surged in secondary defense patterns. The collision of powers created a shockwave that rippled outward, entirely distorting the spiritual environment. Magnificent, Viralgo purred despite being repelled. Such untrained potential. The dynasty will extract considerable value from your abilities once properly contained. The battle expanded across the clearing, dynasty warriors engaging Haribel's forces with precision tactics. Haribel herself released her Resurrection, water-based powers transfer, ming her appearance as she engaged multiple opponents simultaneously. Neliel, despite lacking a visible Zanpakutō, demonstrated extraordinary hand-to-hand combat skills, her movements fluid and devastatingly effective. From their observation point, Rukia and her team watched with professional assessment, documenting combat capabilities and tactical patterns of all participants. Most impressive was Uzumaki himself, whose fighting style combined elements completely foreign to Soul Society traditions with increasingly sophisticated application of his dual Zanpakutō manifestations. His combat technique isn't Shinigami-based, their analyst noted with fascination. The footwork, the hand positions, they're from an entirely different martial tradition. And those duplicates, Renji added as Uzumaki created perfect copies of himself that engaged separate opponents. That's not a speed technique or illusion, they're physically present, with independent spiritual signatures. The battle shifted as Viralgo deployed specialized equipment, similar to the disruption devices mentioned in their intelligence briefings. As these activated around the clearing, localized distortions affected spiritual pressure application, hampering Haribel's water techniques and creating interference patterns in the crystalline structures. Uzumaki adapted with remarkable speed, his chains extending to neutralize the devices while his water manifestation maintained defensive coverage. More impressive was his tactical coordination with both Haribel and Neliel, the three moving in synchronized patterns. That suggested practiced teamwork despite their disparate origins. Their integration is extraordinary, Rukia observed. Three different spiritual traditions functioning in complementary patterns. The dynasty forces, despite superior numbers and specialized equipment, found themselves gradually outmaneuvered. Viralgo himself engaged Uzumaki directly, their powers clashing in spectacular displays that sent ripples of distortion through the forest. The Vasto Lord's metallic body absorbed and redirected energy with unnerving efficiency, while his knowledge of ancient techniques was evident and his precise targeting of vulnerability points. "You fight well for an untrained vessel," Viralgo taunted as they briefly disengaged from a particularly intense exchange. "But your understanding remains superficial. The power you channel was never meant for singular containment." "Maybe not," Uzumaki acknowledged, chains and water swirling in renewed patterns around him. "But I'm a quick study." He formed a peculiar cross-shaped hand signal, and suddenly the clearing filled with dozens of perfect duplicates, each manifesting the same dual Zanpakutō abilities. They swarmed Viralgo from all directions, chains and water attacking in coordinated patterns that even the ancient Vasto Lord struggled to counter simultaneously. "Impossible," breathed their analyst. "Spiritual division at that." Scale should dilute power beyond combat effectiveness, yet each duplicate maintains viable attack capability. The tide turned definitively as Haribel and Neliel broke through their respective opposition to converge on Viralgo alongside Uzumaki's assault. The dynasty leader, recognizing the shifting balance, abruptly disengaged with unexpected speed, retreating to a defensive position among his remaining warriors. This encounter yields insufficient tactical advantage, he announced with cold calculation rather than evident disappointment. The dynasty withdraws to reassess. Before anyone could prevent it, Viralgo activated a device that created localized Garganta portals around each of his remaining forces. They retreated through these dimensional tiers with practiced efficiency, leaving only damaged crystal formations and fallen warriors behind. As the battle concluded, Rukia signaled her team to maintain observation. The aftermath would provide equally valuable intelligence about how Uzumaki's faction operated beyond combat situations. Below, the expedition regrouped, assessing injuries and damage to the Nexus site. Most revealing was the interaction between the three principal figures, Uzumaki, Haribel, and the newly restored Neliel. Your combat capabilities have returned with your adult form, Haribel observed to Neliel, her tone professional but with undertones of genuine respect. Muscle memory persisted even when conscious recollection failed, Neliel replied, examining her hands with mild wonder. Though I find myself without my Zanpakutō, Gamuza Mu, Saint remain sealed until I fully stabilize. Uzumaki approached, dismissing his remaining duplicates which disappeared in small puffs of smoke. Are you okay with this transformation? It seemed sudden. The question revealed concern beyond tactical assessment, genuine care for the individual behind the combat asset. Neliel's expression softened slightly, recognition of this distinction evident in her response. The transition is disorienting, she admitted. Fragments of my child self's experiences and emotions remain predominant, while my adult knowledge returns in uneven segments. Integration will require time. She looked around at the Nexus site, now showing battle damage across its crystalline structures. Unfortunately, time may be a luxury we cannot afford. Viralgo retreated too easily, Haribel noted. Strategic mind already analyzing implications. His forces were sufficient to maintain engagement considerably longer. He got what he came for, Uzumaki concluded grimly. Intelligence about our capabilities, confirmation about the Nexus activation, and probably samples of the crystal structures for his technologists to study. The dynasty's interest confirms this site's significance, Kimura added. Already recording damage patterns with his equipment. Their technological capacity to disrupt crystal harmonics has advanced since our last encounter. Adaptation based on previous observations. Uzumaki surveyed the damaged nexus with evident frustration. We need to understand what we're actually activating before more factions decide to intervene. These connections between dimensions weren't destroyed without reason. Yet their destruction created the fragmented realms we now inhabit, Neliel observed thoughtfully. Hueco Mundo's endless hunger, Soul Society's rigid hierarchies, the human world's spiritual ignorance, all symptoms of separation rather than balanced connection. Philosophical perspectives aside, Haribel interjected practically, we should secure whatever information remains here before dynasty reinforcements arrive. Kimura, status of your documentation. Approximately 68% complete before interruption, the scientist Arankar reported. The platform's most critical symbolic sequences have been recorded, though contextual arrangements suffer from battle damage. Continue while we establish perimeter security, Haribel ordered. Uzumaki, can your connection to the platform extract additional information despite the damage? Naruto returned to the central symbols, kneeling to reconnect with the activation points that had responded to his dual Zanpakutō. As his hands touched the damaged surface, his expression shifted through confusion to focused concentration. It's changing, he reported. The information, reconfiguring itself. Like it's adapting to prevent data loss from the damage. Self-preserving information architecture, Kimura noted with scientific excitement. Extraordinary. From her observation position, Rukia signaled her analyst to focus recording equipment on this interaction. The platform's response to Uzumaki's spiritual signature represented technology far beyond Soul Society's curry. NT understanding, possibly predating established history itself. Below, Uzumaki's connection deepened, crimson chains and water manifestations flowing from his body into the platform's structure, apparently facilitating information transfer. His eyes widened suddenly. "There's a map," he announced. "Not geographical, dimensional, showing connection points between realms." His expression grew troubled. "And something else. A warning about the hunger between worlds. Something that exists in the void separating dimensions, that feeds on spiritual energy. The shadows that came through the cracks." Neliel quoted from Nell's earlier statement, her fragmented memories providing context. "When the 5 thrones broke, the platform is transferring information directly to me," Uzumaki continued, his voice taking on an almost trance-like quality. "Coordinates for other nexus points. One in particular, it's resonating more strongly than the others. Located somewhere deep beneath what's now called the Manos Forest. The forest depths have been inaccessible for millennia," Haribel noted with concern. "The spiritual density creates pressure that crushes even Ijuka's class hollows beyond certain levels." "This nexus point contains something important," Uzumaki insisted, still connected to the platform. "Something about the third throne. Earth element." As he spoke these words, something extraordinary occurred. The platform's illumination intensified dramatically, and one of the previously dormant symbols, distinct from the fire and water symbols already activated, began pulsing with amber light. Simultaneously, the ground throughout the clearing trembled, crystal formations vibrating in harmonic resonance. "Earth element activation initiating," Kimura reported urgently, his instruments displaying chaotic readings. "Spatial coordinates locking onto Nexus Network. The system is trying to manifest the third throne's power. Without a compatible vessel," Haribel realized. Alarm breaking through her usual composure. The raw elemental force could destabilize the entire region. Uzumaki broke his connection with the platform, leaping back as cracks began spreading outward from the Earth symbol. "We need to contain this." The activation sequence started automatically when I mentioned the third throne. The tremors intensified, crystal trees surrounding the sea, leering beginning to fracture under harmonic stress. Spiritual pressure rose dramatically throughout the area, creating visible distortion in the air above the platform. "Kimura, shutdown options," Haribel demanded. "Unknown." The scientist responded, desperately analyzing readings. "This technology predates any documented interruption protocols. Then we create our own," Uzumaki decided, chains manifesting in complex patterns. "Benihimo, Kaiyoho, containment formation." His dual Zanpakutō manifestations expanded dramatically, crimson chains interweaving with flowing water to create a dome. E-like structure over the increasingly unstable platform. The Earth symbol's amber light intensified further, now shooting upward in a pillar of energy that strained against the containment field. "Cheer, Neliel, add your power to the containment," Uzumaki called out. Triple-layer resonance might stabilize it. Without hesitation, both Arankar moved to strategic positions around the platform. Haribel released her water-based spiritual pressure in precisely modulated waves that merged with Uzumaki's containment structure. Neliel, despite lacking her Zanpakutō, contributed concentrated ritual pressure that seemed to naturally harmonize with the others. From their observation point, Rukia and her team watched in fascination as the 3 distinct spiritual signatures merged into a coordinated containment system, Shinigami-like, Arankar, and Uzumaki's hybrid energy working in unprecedented harmony. "We should assist," Rukia decided, preparing to reveal their presence. If that energy destabilizes completely, the spiritual shockwave could affect multiple dimensions. Before they could move, however, an unexpected intervention occurred. A blur of movement shot from the forest. Canopy, a small black cat that transformed mid-leap into a woman with dark skin and purple hair, wearing a distinctive orange and black combat suit. Yoruichi Shihoin, Rukia identified in shock. The former captain landed gracefully beside the containment effort, assessing the situation with expert precision before placing her hands against the energy field. Her unique spiritual pressure, honed rough centuries as both Onmitsukido commander and exile, added a 4th harmonic layer to the containment. "Interesting friends you've made, Uzumaki," Yoruichi commented with remarkable casualness given the circumstances. "Though your excavation techniques need refinement." "You've been watching us," Uzumaki replied without breaking concentration, recognition rather than accusation in his tone. Obviously, amateur dimensional manipulation tends to attract attention. Despite her flippant words, Yoruichi's contribution to the containment field showed sophisticated understanding of the energies involved. This activation sequence needs a compatible vessel or it will continue attempting manifestation until catastrophic failure. There is no compatible vessel, Kimura objected. The Earth, Throne's original guardian perished millennia ago according to the platform's historical data. Then we create compatibility, Yoruichi countered. Temporary resonance matching to fool the system into dormancy. She looked directly at Uzumaki. Your chakra manipulation techniques might work. Shadow clone with elemental affinity modification. Uzumaki's eyes widened in understanding. Earth release variation. It could work as a temporary vessel to absorb the excess energy. Maintaining his contribution to the containment field with his right hand, he formed complex one-handed signs with his left, creating a single duplicate that immediately began changing its chakra composition. The clone's appearance altered subtly, skin taking on a more stone-like texture as it prepared to receive the earth element energy. Ready, Yoruichi asked, positioning herself to create an opening in the containment field. Now, Uzumaki confirmed. With synchronized precision, the 4 containment specia lists created a controlled aperture in the field. The clone leapt through this opening, directly into the amber energy pillar emanating from the earth symbol. Upon contact, the energy flow redirected, pouring into the modified clone whose form absorbed it like a conductor grounding electrical current. For several tense moments, the clone's form fluctuated wildly, threatening to dissolve under the massive energy influx. Then, gradually, stability returned as the energy balanced within the temporary vessel. The Earth symbol's light dimmed to a manageable glow, and the platform's violent trembling subsided to gentle vibration. The clone, now permanently altered by the energy absorption, stood at the platform's center, its appearance dramatically transformed. Its skin had become entirely stone-like in texture, with amber crystal formations protruding from shoulders and forearms. Earth-toned patterns similar to Uzumaki's water markings covered its visible skin. Containment successful, Kimura reported with evident relief. The activation sequence has accepted the substitute vessel and entered dormancy mode. The clone spoke, its voice resonating with harmonics not present in Uzumaki's normal speech. Temporary solution only. This form cannot maintain earth element integration indefinitely. Proper vessel still required, but it buys us time, Uzumaki noted, cautiously releasing. The containment field as stability returned. We can research proper transfer protocols before the energy destabilizes again. Yoruichi crossed her arms, studying the transformed clone with professional interest. Impressive adaptation. Your chakra manipulation abilities provide options unavailable to standard Shinigami or hollow powers. Speaking of unavailable options, Haribel interjected, turning to face Yoruichi directly. Perhaps you could explain why a former Soul Society captain has been observing our activities without introducing herself. Curiosity, Yoruichi replied with a Sual shrug that belied the tension of the moment. When unprecedented spiritual anomalies emerge in neighboring dimensions, it pays to investigate personally rather than rely on official reports. And now, Uzumaki questioned, studying her with evident interest. Having witnessed enough for a thorough assessment, what conclusions have you drawn? Yoruichi's golden eyes showed genuine amusement. That you're either monumentally reckless or precisely where you need to be. Possibly both simultaneously. Her expression shifted to something more serious. You're activating systems that predate or nth-dimensional boundaries, systems deliberately disconnected for reasons lost to most historical records. But not all records, Uzumaki suggested, recognizing the implication in her words. You know something about what happened to the original connection network. Fragments, Yoruichi acknowledged. The Shihoin clan maintained certain historical documents deemed too dangerous for general archives. References to the 5 thrones, the original fracture, the hunger between dimensions. From their observation point, Rukia signaled her team to continue recording while she processed this extraordinary development. Yoruichi Shihoin's appearance and apparent knowledge of ancient systems added yet another layer of complexity to an already unprecedented situation. Moreover, her willingness to assist rather than confront Uzumaki suggested at minimum a policy of non-interference, possibly even tacit support. Below, The conversation continued as the expedition secured the stabilized platform and prepared to return to Las Noches with their findings. The Earth-infused clone maintained its position at the platform's center, apparently serving as an anchor for the dormant energy. "Will you return to Soul Society with this information?" Uzumaki asked Yoruichi directly. "Eventually," she replied with characteristic ambiguity. "Though perhaps not through official channels initially. Own discoveries benefit from careful context setting before formal reporting." "You mean some discoveries would cause panic if reported directly to the Central 46, Haribel translated dryly. "Your words, not mine," Yoruichi responded with a cat-like smile. "But essentially correct. Evidence suggesting the fundamental structure of dimensional boundaries might be artificial rather than natural. Would challenge certain theological foundations of Soul Society governance. It would do considerably more than that," came a new voice as Rukia stepped from concealment, having made the decision to reveal herself. "It would require complete reassessment of Soul Society's historical understanding." The expedition members turned in surprise, defense postures immediately assumed until Yoruichi raised a hand in casual greeting. "Captain Kuchiki, I wondered when you joined the conversation." "You knew we were here," Rukia stated rather than asked. "Of course, your Ryutsu suppression is excellent by standard metrics. But some of us wrote those metrics." Yoruichi's tone remained light despite the serious implications of Soul Society surveillance. "Your team can join us as well. The pretense of covert observation seems rather pointless now." Renji and the other team members emerged from concealment, maintaining professional composure despite the awkwardness of their exposure. Uzumaki Street. You eyed them with curious interest rather than hostility, his chains having retracted though they remained visible just beneath his skin, ready to manifest if needed. "Soul Society sent you to investigate the anomalies," he surmised. "How long have you been watching?" "Long enough to witness significant revelations," Rukia replied diplomatically. "I am Captain Rukia Kuchiki of the 13th Division. We were dispatched to assess unusual spiritual phenomena centered around Las Noches." "And what have you concluded from your assessment?" Haribel questioned, her posture remaining defensive despite the seemingly peaceful contact. "That the situation is far more complex than our initial briefing suggested," Rukia answered honestly. "What we've witnessed here goes beyond factional politics or power consolidation in Hueco Mundo. These nexus points and their connection to ancient dimensional systems represent previously unknown aspects of spiritual reality. Yet you didn't intervene during the dynasty attack," Neliel observed with analytical precision, "suggesting you prioritized information gathering over potential alliance. Standard protocol for initial contact scenarios," Renji explained. Stepping forward beside Rukia, Lieutenant Renji Abarai, "We're here to understand, not necessarily confront." "A refreshingly reasonable approach from Soul Society," Yoruichi commented with mild surprise. "The old leadership would have dispatched execution squads based on far less significant anomalies. The Gote 13 has evolved since your departure, Yoruichi-san," Rukia responded with a hint of pride. "Captain Commander Kiraku specifically instructed us to prioritize investigation over confrontation." Uzumaki approached the Soul Society representatives, his expression open and direct. "Then let's dispense with surveillance and speak plainly. I'm Naruto Uzumaki, from a dimension separate from either Soul Society or Hueco Mundo. I arrived here accidentally during a battle in my world. Discovered abilities I'm still learning to understand, and have been working to help stabilize this realm while searching for a way home." The straightforward introduction caught Rukia momentarily off guard. Such directness rarely featured in diplomatic contact between dimensional factions. "Your activities have extended well beyond personal survival," she observed. "The settlements, the Crystal Network, the Governing Council, these represent systematic restructuring of Hueco Mundo's spiritual ecosystem." "Yes," Uzumaki acknowledged without hesitation. "Because I found a realm defined by endless hunger and predation, where beings capable of growth and civilization were trapped in cycles of consumption and evolution through destruction. The crystals offered an alternative path, stabilization without predation, community without hierarchy based solely on power. Noble aspirations," Rukia allowed, but with profound implications for dimensional balance. "These nexus points activating connect to systems Soul Society has no record of." "No public record," Yoruichi corrected meaningfully. The question becomes whether that absence represents historical oversight or deliberate suppression. The implication hung in the air, challenging foundational assumptions about Soul Society's role in maintaining dimensional order. Rukia felt the weight of this moment. Her repo RT would significantly impact how the Gote 13 and Central 46 responded to these developments. I propose an information exchange, she decided, making a captain's judgment call that exceeded her explicit mandate. Full disclosure of our observations and concerns in return for comprehensive briefing on your discoveries and intentions. Direct cooperation rather than parallel assessment, Haribel noted with approval. Efficient, if unexpected from Soul Society representatives. The situation warrants extraordinary measures, Rukia replied. Whatever these ancient systems represent, their reactivation affects all connected dimensions. Ignorance serves no one's interests. Uzumaki glanced at Haribel and Neliel, some unspoken communication passing between them before he nodded agreement. Las Noches can accommodate your team for formal discussions. Our council meets tomorrow to discuss these discoveries. Your perspective would be valuable. A Soul Reaper at the council table, Haribel mused with subtle irony. Aizen would find the development amusing. Aizen lacked imagination despite his intelligence, Yoruichi commented. He sought to recreate the world in his image rather than understand its deeper patterns. As arrangements were made for the expanded return to Las Noches, Rukia found herself walking alongside Uzumaki, studying him with professional curiosity. Is dual Zanpakutō manifestation defied established spiritual theory, yet operated with remarkable stability. More intriguing was his natural leadership quality, neither domineering nor hesitant, but balanced in a way that inspired cooperation across traditionally hostile factions. You have questions, he noted, correctly reading her analytical observation. Many, she acknowledged. Your abilities represent a significant theoretical challenge to our understanding of Zanpakutō manifestation. Dual aspects shouldn't coexist without internal conflict, yet yours appear fully harmonized. Benihi, Mo and Kyoho emerged from different aspects of my chakra network, he explained, seeming comfortable with the technical discussion. In my world, I contain the nine-tailed fox spirit, Kurama, whose chakra apparently resonated with dormant spiritual frameworks here in Hueco Mundo. The manifestations represent different elements of that energy-finding expression. And there may be more manifestations to come, Rukia surmised. Connecting this to the 5 elemental symbols on the platform, corresponding to the remaining elements. That's my working theory, he confirmed. Though the Earth element's attempt to manifest without a proper vessel suggests the process isn't entirely within my control. Few significant spiritual evolutions are, Rukia observed, thinking of her own Zanpakutō's development and Ichigo's complicated spiritual journey. The boundary between wielder and power often blurs as abilities mature. Uzumaki studied her with newfound interest. You speak from experience. Some, she acknowledged. My closest friend underwent unprecedented spiritual evolution, challenging many of Soul Society's fundamental assumptions about Shinigami powers and hollow integration. Your situation, while different in specifics, resonates with similar patterns. Ichigo Kurosaki, Uzumaki identified, surprising her with his knowledge. Yoruichi mentioned him during her observations. A human who became Shinigami. Then something more complex. Rukia nodded, impressed by his information gathering. Ichigo defied categorization, still does. Soul Society initially resisted his existence, then gradually recognized his value as both ally and theoretical expansion of our understanding. And now, how would Soul Society view someone activating ancient systems that potentially challenge established dimensional boundaries? The direct question cut to the heart of Rukia's mission. She considered her response carefully, aware that her answer would shape the developing relatio between this anomalous faction and Soul Society. Some would view it as threat requiring containment, she admitted honestly. Others as opportunity for growth and understanding. The balance between these perspectives will likely determine official response. And your perspective, Captain Kuchiki? I believe knowledge serves better than ignorance, even when uncomfortable, she replied. These systems existed before our current understanding. If they're reactivating now, better to comprehend and guide the process than attempt suppression that may ultimately fail. Her answer seemed to satisfy him. a connection of mutual understanding established despite their different origins. As they continued toward Las Noches, Rukia found herself drawn to the mystery this unusual being represented, not merely his anomalous powers, but the vision he articulated for something beyond the established order of predator and prey, life and death, hollow and shinigami. Whether that vision represented dangerous disruption or necessary evolution remained to be seen. For now, her duty was clear: observe, understand, and report with the objectivity her position demanded. Yet beneath that professional detachment, a spark of fascination had been kindled. The world they understood was changing, boundaries shifting that had seemed permanent for millennia. And at the center of this transformation stood Naruto Uzumaki, a bridge between worlds in more ways than he perhaps realized. The council chamber had been expanded to accommodate new participants, its crystalline architecture responding to the settlement's growth. Where once a single table had dominated the space, now a more complex arrangement created functional areas for different discussion groups while maintaining the central gathering point for formal decisions. Hinata observed these changes with her Byakugan active, monitoring not just the physical adaptations but the spiritual network expanding throughout Las Noches. The constant pain this caused her had become familiar, a dull pressure behind her eyes that occasionally flared into sharper agony when she extended her perception to deeper dimensional layers. The Southwest's quadrant's disruption has disappeared, she reported to Apache, who coordinated security operations in Tyr's absence. Whatever was causing the anomalous readings has either withdrawn or revealed itself. The Soul Society delegation, Apache surmised, her heterochromatic eyes narrowing slightly. Tyr-sama's message indicated they've established direct contact. Yes, they should arrive within the hour. Hinata deactivated her Byakugan with a slight wince, the relief from released pressure momentary before the residual ache reasserted itself. Accommodations have been prepared in the East Wing, with appropriate security measures. Apache nodded, though her expression revealed lingering skepticism. Shinigami within our walls. 2 years ago, the very suggestion would have been grounds for challenging one's sanity. Many things have changed, Hinata acknowledged, her gaze drifting toward the window where the transformed outer settlement was visible. What had begun as scattered shelters now resembled a proper city. Crystalline structures interspersed with more conventional buildings as the space evolved to accommodate growing numbers of stabilized hollows. Including you, Apache observed with uncharacteristic perception. Your eyes see more than they did when you arrived, don't they? Beyond just the enhanced Byakugan. Hinata hesitated before responding, unused to is cussing the changes she'd been experiencing. Yes, the dimensional boundaries appear thinner to my perception. Sometimes I see overlapping realities, possibilities branching from decision points. Echoes of what might have been or might yet be. Like Nell's fractured perceptions, Apache suggested. Past and present overlapping, similar, though more expansive. Hinata touched the veins around her eyes, which remained partially visible even with her Byakugan deactivated. The Hyuga bloodline was always sensitive to spiritual boundaries. Here in Hueco Mundo, that sensitivity has evolved beyond anything known in my clan's history. Their conversation paused as Mila Rose entered, her imposing presence commanding attention despite her relatively casual demeanor. The expedition has passed the outer markers, she reported, and they've brought company beyond the expected Soul Society observers. What kind of company? Apache questioned sharply. Neliel tu Odelschwenk, Mila Rose replied, a complex mixture of emotions coloring her usually straightforward tone. Restored to her adult form, apparently. This news momentarily stunned both listeners. Nell's true identity had been suspected by those in Tyr's inner circle, but her permanent restoration carried significant implications. How did this happen? Hinata asked, immediately concerned for the childlike Arankar who had become something of a ward to both her and Naruto. Unknown, but related to their discoveries at the Crystalline Forest, Mila Rose responded. The report mentioned a nexus activation that triggered her transformation. Hinata rose immediately, moving toward the entrance. I should be there when they arrive. Neliel, will need familiar presence during this transition, regardless of her adult restoration. She made her way through Las Noches' transformed corridors, noting how crystal formations had integrated with the original architecture, creating an environment that felt increasingly organic rather than constructed. The fortress had become a living system, responding to the activities and needs of its inhabitants in subtle but meaningful ways. At the main entrance, a receptee on committee had already formed. Administrative Arankar, settlement representatives, and security personnel arranged in formal welcome formation. Hinata took position at the forefront, her status as Naruto's closest advisor and settlement co-founder acknowledged without question despite her human origins. The expedition appeared on the horizon, their number expanded beyond the original departure group. Even without her Byakugan active, Hinata could distinguish the Soul Society representatives by their distinctive black uniforms, as well as another figure whose orange outfit stood out against Hueco Mundo's monochromatic landscape. Most striking was the transformation in Nell's form, the small child replaced by a tall, graceful woman with flowing green hair, her mature presence unmistakable even at distance. Beside her walked Naruto, their conversation animated despite what must have been extensive revelations and challenges during the expedition. Hinata activated her Byakugan briefly, seeking insight into Nell's condition. The spiritual network within the restored Arankar showed remarkable complexity, not fully stabilized, with fluctuating patterns suggesting ongoing integration between child and adult aspects of her consciousness. As the group reached the entrance, formal introductions began, necessary diplomatic protocol despite the unusual circumstances. Hinata observed the Soul Society representatives with professional interest. Captain Rukia Kuchiki, small in stature but radiating composed authority, Lieutenant Renji Abarai, his distinctive red hair and tattoos marking him as visually striking as his spiritual pressure suggested power, and 3 specialized officers whose equipment marked them as technical support rather than primary diplomatic personnel. The additional figure, Yoruichi Shihoin, Hinata learned, carried herself with cat-like grace and self-assured confidence that suggested significant combat experience and leadership history. Her golden eyes held shrewd assessment beneath casual demeanor. When formal introductions reached Nell, now properly introduced as Nelliel II Odelschwenk, Hinata stepped forward with particular interest. Nell, she greeted softly, deliberately using the familiar name despite the transformed appearance. How are you feeling? The adult Arankar's expression softened immediately, recognition and affection evident despite her more mature features. Hinata, she replied, her voice deeper but maintaining traces of Nell's distinctive speech patterns. Nell is, I am still adjusting. Everything feels simultaneously familiar and strange. She touched her head where the crack in her mask remained visible. Memories continue returning, though not in orderly fashion. We'll help however we can, Hinata assured her, genuine concern evident. Your room remains as you left it, though we can arrange different accommodations if you prefer. Nell's room is fine, Nelliel replied, momentary regression to third-person ref. Errands revealing the ongoing integration process. Familiar surroundings may assist memory consolidation. As the reception transitioned to movement inside Las Noches, Naruto approached Hinata directly, his expression conveying both excitement at their discoveries and concern for events during his absence. The southwestern disturbance, he asked quietly, resolved. It was the Soul Society observation team, she confirmed. No other security incidents during your absence, though the settlement expansion continues accelerating. The crystal network has extended another kilometer beyond previous boundaries. Naruto nodded, absorbing this information while they walked. There's so much to tell you, he said, lowering his voice further. The nexus point, the platform activation, the Earth element manifestation, it changes everything we understood about what's happening here. Your clone, the one that absorbed the Earth element, where is it? Hinata had noticed its absence from the returning group. Remained at the Nexus site as an anchor for the dormant energy, Naruto explained. It's stable for now, but represents a temporary solution. We need to find a proper vessel for the Earth element before the clone's structure deteriorates. They reached a private antechamber where the expedition leaders could refresh themselves before the formal council meeting. As others moved to various preparations, Naruto and Hinata found a moment of relative privacy. Your eyes, he noted with immediate concern, gently touching the pronounced veins. They're more visible than before I left. The dimensional thinning continues, she acknowledged, no longer attempting to minimize the changes she was experiencing. My perception expands daily, sometimes beyond my ability to properly process. Kimura has been helpful with managing the physiological symptoms, but the visions themselves continue, Naruto finished, understanding evident in his expression. What are you seeing? Hinata hesitated, organizing thoughts that resisted conventional description. Connections. Pathways between decision points. Sometimes glimpses of other versions of ourselves. Paths not taken, choices made differently. She met his gaze directly. And increasingly, something moving between dimensions. Observing. Waiting. The hunger between worlds, Naruto whispered, recognition flashing in his eyes. The Nexus platform warned about entities that exist in the void between dimensions, that feed on spiritual energy. Yes, Hinata confirmed, relief evident that he understood without extensive explanation. Whatever damaged the original connection network, whatever caused the original fracture, mentioned in the historical fragments, it created spaces where these entities could manifest. The crystal network we're building seems to be repairing those vulnerabilities, but in doing so, it's making them active again, Naruto concluded grimly. They're noticing the repairs, the changing spiritual landscape. Their moment of shared understanding was interrupted as Tyr approached, her expression indicating important matters requiring immediate attention. The Soul Society represent at Ive's request preliminary discussion before the formal council, she informed them. Captain Kuchiki has information regarding Soul Society's monitoring of dimensional fluctuations that may contextualize our Nexus discoveries. Of course, Naruto agreed, transitioning smoothly to diplomatic mode. The Eastern Conference room should provide appropriate privacy while maintaining security protocols. As they moved to this meeting, Hinata noted how naturally leadership had come to Naruto in this strange realm, his inherent charisma and determination finding expression in governance rather than merely combat. The administrative capabilities he'd begun developing in preparation for his hoped-for Hokage role had found unexpected application in Hueco Mundo. The Eastern Conference room, like much of Las Noches, had evolved beyond its original stark design. Crystal formations integrated with conventional architecture created an environment both functional and aesthetically pleasing, a small but significant departure from the utilitarian approach that had defined previous Hueco Mundo structures. Captain Kuchiki waited there alongside Lieutenant Abarai and Yoruichi Shihoin, the latter loungee ing with casual grace that belied her evident alertness. Tyr positioned herself strategically, present for the discussion but maintaining slight distance to emphasize Naruto's primary authority. Thank you for accommodating this preliminary discussion, Captain Kuchiki began formally. Before presenting information to your full council, there are sensitive matters best addressed in more limited company. We appreciate the discretion, Naruto acknowledged. Our council includes representatives from various factions, not all with equal security clearance. Rukia nodded understanding before continuing. Soul Society's Department of Research and Development has been monitoring dimensional boundaries with increasing concern for approximately 18 months, predating your arrival in Hueco Mundo. Multiple unusual fluctuations have been recorded, particularly in regions where the membrane between dimensions naturally thins. Consistent with our observations, Hinata noted. The Byakugan detects progressive thinning throughout Hueco Mundo, accelerating in regions where crystal formations are established. Not merely thinning, Rukia clarified, her expression grave. In certain locations, actual breaches have occurred, temporary tiers allowing passage of something between dimensions. Incursions. Tyr questioned sharply. Of what nature? Lieutenant Abarai activated a Prohe-Seishin device that displayed complex spiritual readings alongside what appeared to be surveillance images. Inconsistent manifestations, typically brief and localized. Witness reports describe shadowy entities with no fixed form, absorbing spiritual energy from their surroundings before disappearing. Soul Society initially attributed these incidents to residual Quincy War damage, Rukia continued. However, pattern analysis revealed deliberate behavior rather than random dimensional decay. Something is systematically testing boundaries between realms. Yoruichi straightened from her casual posture, her expression suddenly serious. The restricted Shihoin archives contain references to similar incidents preceding the original fracture, entities called void feeders that emerged from dimensional interstices during periods of spiritual instability. The hunger between worlds, Naruto repeated, exchanging meaningful glances with Hinata. Exactly as the Nexus platform warned. Which raises the critical question, Cheer observed, of whether your crystal network is preventing these incursions or inadvertently facilitating them by altering established boundaries. A heavy silence followed this observation. The implications profound regardless of answer. Naruto studied the projected images with intense focus, connections forming in his mind. Neither, he concluded finally, or perhaps both simultaneously. The Nexus platform described the original connection network as designed specifically to regulate dimensional traffic, allowing controlled passage while preventing unwanted incursions. When that network was damaged, the regulated pathways collapsed, but left unstructured weak points throughout the dimensional membrane. Like a properly maintained border with checkpoints versus a collapsed wall with random gaps, Hinata suggested, using her diplomatic background to frame the concept. Exactly, Naruto agreed. The crystal network isn't creating new vulnerabilities. It's attempting to repair existing ones by re-establishing structured pathways. But the repair process itself creates temporary instability as systems reconnect. A compelling theory, Rukia acknowledged, but with significant implications for Soul Society's security protocols. The Gote 13 maintains responsibility for protecting dimensional boundaries against unauthorized incursions. A Sistema. Chick reconstruction of those boundaries outside our oversight represents potential vulnerability. Yet your presence here suggests openness to cooperation rather than opposition, Naruto noted. RWISE this would be a military confrontation rather than diplomatic discussion. A hint of respect showed in Rukia's expression. Captain Commander Kiraku recognizes that unprecedented situations may require unprecedented approaches. My instructions permit exploratory diplomatic engagement alongside assessment. Translation. Officially they're investigating, unofficially they're considering cooperation. Yoruichi interpreted with characteristic directness. Soul Society politics requires maintaining appearance of control while actually adapting to changing circumstances. The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.